Okay. Yeah, okay, I'm live. Hey everyone, Felix here. It's been a bit of a morning. Well, it's technically the late afternoon, but you know. Anyways, so something that was I think for the past week or so, I've been trying to put my mind to something. I've got other projects on the side, but just like with last time when I decided to, you know what if I did a little bit of rescripting or like redesigning for Black Ops 6 cuz a lot of this stuff there was bugging me. We're looking at the beginning of the series Black Ops 1 because something I like, something at least from like the Gunsberg space. Something I like to notice from the Gunsberg space is a lot of the stuff here is where is that? Yeah, if you're familiar with the term anachronism, which means something that is a depiction of something in media that is just somehow wildly out of place or along those lines, something that doesn't fit within the time period. Like for example, when I was back in elementary school and I was getting into writing, there was this like World War II series that I was really interested in and decided to write my own elements of my own. I put 1950s cars in it because I didn't like cars at the time, or I didn't learn to appreciate them enough. And that is what we would consider an anachronism, something that is present in media but is inaccurate to the time period. And at least and in some cases very garishly inaccurate to the time period. Because there's a theory that Black Ops was originally going to be set in the 1980s or like around the time Cold War was set, because a lot of the guns present here, like the AKS-74U, these did not exist. This game takes place from 1963 through 1961 through 1968. Most of the guns, a lot of the guns here, a lot of like the equipment here did not exist during that time frame from 1961 through 1968. It wasn't there. It didn't occur, it didn't happen. Let me see if chat's up. All right. Yeah, I heard a theory that it was supposed to take place in the 80s, early in development. Yeah, that would make sense with a lot of. Hold on, is chat broken? Let me upload chat box. All right. All right, there we are. Yeah, from Big Yike, I heard a theory that Black Ops 1 was supposed to take place in the 80s, early in development. Yeah, because a lot of these are really implied to be like a lot of these are features from the 1980s. For example, the G11, the Enfield XL, the XL70, which later became the very infamous SA80. This was nowhere to be found during the 1960s. Um, this isn't like a Fallout situation where it's technically okay to have anachronistic things because it isn't actually in the 50s or 60s. This takes place directly in the 1960s. And unfortunately, like as much as I really like this game just for being as it is, I feel like they didn't nail the vibe at all. They didn't nail the vibe very well. They didn't like it doesn't make an active effort to make you feel like you're playing in the 60s. A lot of this, I think it's because a lot of the elements and tropes from Black Ops took heavy inspiration from 1980s action movies. For example, um like the presence of a lot of these, the Galil. Yeah, this wasn't around until the 70s, for example. And why couldn't they just set it then? Because a lot of the history portrayed here, they would miss out on the entirety of the Vietnam War. Well, mind like if they said in the 70s or the 80s, they would miss out on the majority of the Vietnam War. They would miss out on a lot of infamous events such as the Bay of Pigs invasion, such as like they would get the young oh, I'll get that. I'll get that later. It felt too modern, I will admit. Yeah, it there was like aesthetically it was too close to modern warfare. It tried to make a distinction and like make it feel old fashioned, but a lot of this stuff just didn't fit at all. For example, the KS-23, this was yeah, anachronistic as it started development in the 1970s. This is in a mission during 1963. This is in Vorkuta. And I decided, you know what if I ended up replacing a lot of these, because a lot of these building up on, just like how I took the inspiration from like 80s and 90s action movies in Black Ops 6. For this one, I took a lot of inspiration from Bond movies at the time, namely Thunderball is something I like to cite because. And the other game, something that I like to discuss, yeah, maybe flashback levels, I don't know, but I feel like it wouldn't hit quite as hard because flashbacks would have it like, why not set it consistently in one era? And ironically enough, I'm not the first to point this out. Anachronisms and inaccuracies in Black Ops 1, anachronisms in Call of Duty Black Ops, of course, this is like all that. Both COD fans and just like regular like fellow gun nerds have been pointing this out since the beginning of time, ever since it started, because a lot of these because they like citing this Volcanet and COD Addict, they pointed out a lot of these are historically inaccurate for the time. So looking at as it is, okay, so the 1911 is kind of a classic and it entirely fits within this setting. There isn't really a point to change it other than making it accurate to the era. Make it a GI, like a World War II issue 1911. A lot of the guns here are directly from World War II, or as did the Soviets at normal pump actions? They did, but they didn't develop them until later on. Which is why a lot of the like this is like elements of how I would redesign the levels. Winchester because something I decided to do was replace all the presences of the KS-23 with the, where is that? Yeah, we'll get into that in a second. Rising Storm 2. Ithaka 37. Let me find the one that I'm looking for. This is already in Black Ops and it does fit the era, but not necessarily the type. Yeah, the Winchester Model 1912. These ones, despite being an American shotgun, are generally like, because you could see they were common enough to be used in the Soviet Union for movie production. So, and this is what the original origin of the KS-23 design came from the Winchester 1912, which is American. It was used in World War I and World War II, and I think also in the Vietnam War, which makes it accurate. But the Soviets would probably have enough for like prison control and police force, where they would be using Winchester 1912s. I also gave them to the Cubans because those were like the Cuban police force and like the Cuban Revolutionary Army, which is the referring to the Communist Army, which is Communist Army at the time, not the rebels, which we are fighting for in Operation 40. No South Africans in Black Ops 2 Angola levels. Yeah. They should have shown like a lot of like Savimbi's forces in Unita would have had a lot of South African support at the time, because like Cuban like both like we know the CIA was assisting Unita, but the biggest backer of them was Israel and South Africa, as well as like former elements of Rhodesia that had folded into trained Savimbi's army to form as like an anti-communist force in the region, which is interesting, but that's not like quite the point here. I'm trying to remember how exactly I laid this out, but I guess I'll go through it gun by gun. And something, because I like variety. A lot of these are wildly obscure. I'm bet like no one has ever heard of the George Wilson, the Wilson Match auto pistol. No one has heard of the Remington M53. They did exist. Hold on, let me go find it. The Model 53. This is what would have been the alternative in multiplayer, at least. I don't think they were common enough to show up in single player in like the single player campaign, but at least once. But these would have been the this and this. This is like These are really cool. This is like it looks futuristic even today. This was developed. These two are going to be your alternatives to the 1911. Both of these will be like more accurate, because this is blowback and this is recoil operated, but it will have a lot less recoil because of the really distinct slide design. This was copied on the Laugo Alien later on, and there's a few other pistols that have this today. Yeah, the South African Army was present at that event. Yeah, that's true. At least in Black Ops 2, they covered that a lot of the equipment that Savimbi's forces were using were French and South African in nature, those being the colonial forces in the area. But yeah, this is by Ian. This is by Forgotten Weapons. This is what in multiplayer, this is what would have been the your starting choice, your like one choice that you get like if you upgrade from the 1911, and this being another one. They hold the same capacity. I think they share the same magazines as well, but for the most part that provides, because I don't like the 1911 being the only 45 ACP pistol on the board. But yeah, in general, a lot of these, what I would replace. You know what? I'll go through it mission by mission because that's a bit more interesting. So, in the beginning, for Operation 40, in the mission where you're hunting down Castro, yeah, Portuguese. When you're hunting down Castro, the choice that like you get these wildly anachronistic M16s. Where is that? These AR-15s they did exist at the time during 1961. They've been around since 1958, the basic prototypes, but they didn't look like this. And in overall, yeah, these were not present in Cuba at the time at all. What they should have been using are let me go find it. No military conflict, Vietnam. Where is that? Yeah, the M2A1 advisor carbines. This is the M1A1. This is the semi-automatic only version. What we would get is are the M2A1s, which are full auto variants with the scopes and suppressors, which did exist back then. An RPG 43 and Mark II grenades, replacing, because the grenade launcher underbarrel didn't exist either back then, which is really funny because it's given a really prominent role in the first mission. This gun did not exist in 1961 as it was. They should have been using that's gonna come into play later. They should have been using one of these, or they should have been using one of these, which it would have made sense for the era because this was supposed to be a CIA assassination mission. M1 carbines were already very present in Cuba. Hell, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, the assholes as they were, they used these during the Cuban Revolution to take out Fulgencio Batista. They used the this makes me think earlier when fucking Mollington, that beautiful bastard, he called me Latam. I am not Latam. I'm just interested in Cuban history. I'm just interested in obscure history. Why can't a man do that? But these would have been very prevalent because these were a World War II weapon that would have been upgraded during the Cold War. These were heavily used during the last war they fought, and I think Alex Mason and Woods would have been Korean. Yeah, Force Recon Marine in South Korea. He would have been familiar with this kind of weapon because these were where is that? These were very heavily used in the Korean War. Unofficially, like they unofficially replaced the Tommy gun, the M1A1 Thompson, and a lot of submachine guns because the US needed a pseudo assault rifle. This is not an assault rifle. This is what I would consider closer to a PDW because the round is too big to be a pistol round, even though it is in pistols, as we'll later see. This would have been the primary choice for such a mission like that. It was lightweight. I've held one of these in real life. It is a beautiful gun. It is so lightweight. It feels like you're like, even as I hold it, I held this as a kid at an air show once, and it felt like you were holding a toy. It's a really nice gun. It's a really nice youth gun with a pretty powerful cartridge for its size. and I'm surprised that there aren't more repros of these. It's a really good gun. Like you can learn how to like it's similar to it's different than the M1 Garand and the M14 as well as the Mini 14, but it shares the same manual of arms. So for the most part you're gonna have you hey Cielo, good evening. Hey, good evening. Yeah, we're talking about guns again. We're talking about guns. I'm saying okay, so Cielo, are you like you're familiar with the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, right? So Black Ops 1 depicts the Operation 40. Operation 40 was fictional, but at the same time, I do believe CIA operatives were on the ground at the time. It would be historically accurate to have them there. That being said, all the guns that they are using, the M16A1 and the ASP, which, by the way, this did not exist in 1961 either. This was the John Gardner's choice for the, this was like, if you're familiar with James Bond, I'm a big James Bond fan. This is what John Gardner did to replace the Walther PPK, and I've heard it's a nice shooting gun, but it's very ugly. It's not like, look at this thing. It's not a very good looking weapon. And overall, this was designed as like one of the first intentional concealed carry full size 9mm pistols at the time. This would not have existed during the time. So instead, well, I guess fittingly for Cuba and for it's 1961. It's the same year Dr. No came out. So you know what? We'll throw in the my choice would have been either the full size Walther PPK or the full-size Walther PP or the smaller Walther PPK. This is what I would have given Mason, Woods, and Bowman, as well as Carlos and like the other guys on the team when they were hitting Castro. This is what they would have gotten. This is what they should have gotten at the time. And it's especially ironic because in the movie Dr. No, this is the first ever James Bond movie, they say the American CIA swear by them, and having that would be a really nice touch for the era. It's Black Ops 1, it's a military shooter, but it's supposed to have, you're in the CIA, you're supposed to have spy elements, and the PPK would be a perfect choice, in my opinion, for that kind of mission. For this kind of mission, Operation 40. The numbers, Felix, what do they mean? Yeah. This is, that would have been my choice, and, as well as something I like to note, I guess we're taking a detour. The IMFDB page, I've cited this page a lot. This is about guns and media. This used to have a lot of suggestions about what other guns they could have implemented instead of Black Ops, instead of the various anachronistic weapons that they have. That they should, a lot of the guns that they should have had. And I remember they said the Walther PP would be perfect for taking the ASP's role. And another thing, this is built off of the Smith & Wesson Model 39 handgun, which, by the way, something I like to point out is that Metal Gear Solid 3 shares a lot of design choices and aesthetics fraught with Black Ops 1, especially because they have such a similar, they have different premises. These are, of course, Metal Gear Solid 3 is supposed to be more visceral, more, a bit more intellectual. A bit more intellectual, I guess, by nature, because it's a Kojima game. It's supposed to be in-depth and everything. But they share, because they're set in the same era. This is set in 1964. Call of Duty Black Ops 1 is set in from 1961 through 1968. This would have been, these two games share a visual identity like no other, despite being from completely different and even, ideologically opposing series. So, if you don't want the Walther PP, although I would prefer it, this would have been the perfect choice, the Mark 22 Hush Puppy, because this and the ASP are built off the same gun. The Mark 22, where's that? Oh, the Mark 22 Hush Puppy. This was built off the same one. This is the Smith & Wesson Model 39. which is like these are really pretty guns. They're not like I prefer Colts over Smith and Wessons, but there's really no denying that this is a really good gun, like a really nice looking gun for the time. Hush Puppy in the game fires nine fictional 9mm tranquilizer rounds. Yeah, that didn't exist in real life, but having this in game would have been really interesting, especially as it was in Black Ops DS, which tells a different story. The Mark 22, the Hush Puppy, is in the game. It is in that game. Ironically enough, but it doesn't show up in the main game. But going through that, Operation 40. So weapons found in level. All these for the like the KS-23. It doesn't make sense to have that. Same with the RPK. I think the Cuban army would be buying AKs during this time, but the main weapon would have been the FN FAL, the FAL or the FAL. I guess for the opening scene, something else I described, not like aside from the guns, the cars too, as described in Oh, we're getting an ad. I don't care about this game.
Like in several first-person shooter video games, the KS-23 and which also look way too dirty and used for a luxury car launched just a couple of years ago.
I'm gonna go into like
59 Gaz 13 GCAS into an active combat zone. Which
this is apparently a Russian car, not a Cuban one. They weren't like they might have been importing guns from Russia at the time, but they weren't importing cars yet. The current police car of the Cuban Revolutionary Police Force is the current police car is the Lada, but they wouldn't have been importing them at the time, so instead I switched to the where is that? The Willys Jeep, which would have been in common use at the time because a lot of them had been produced during World War II in the 1952 Chevy style line. Yeah, these like hold on. These would have been, I think, better choices to have like as a Cuban police car, because they fit the era. They look of the time. They look of the time. Like they make these really cool sedans. They don't make cars. Yeah, Cuba does not make cars. Cuba doesn't make much of anything really nowadays. Most of it, I think, is still from sugar and like tobacco exports. But this would have been a really nice touch. And for the CIA agents for Mason and Company, I chose a 1958 Ford Fairlane sedan. This is like a big car. This is like the classical big Yank tank, because in the they point out later on that the car that they use
until the 1970s, every other sharing.
Where is that? Oh, that's another ad.
A luxury car launched just a couple of years ago. Not to mention that such a high-end vehicle would not be used in the Cuban police force. As we will go on to mention, the US is searing. Like in several first-person shooter video games, the KS-23 and every other shotgun in this.
Yeah, credit to the Frosty one, because I am using like elements of his thing in here as like as visual reference. But overall, with the cars, I would have given them the Ford Fairlane, because there's a Mercedes sedan in the game that I think was ported over from Modern Warfare 1, which doesn't really make any sense. And for the most part, Cuban soldiers and guards use a mix of FN FALs and AK-47s, like CZ-52s and SA-24s, which would have been like around during this time. And as well as Smith & Wesson Model 13s, Browning high powers, and Uzis, because these were imported at the time instead of the various AKs and the other ones that we got in use by the Cubans. Also, a lot of American cars. For real, is the FAL that old? My friend in the army uses it. Yeah. Cielo, I'm gonna take you on a ride here. I'm gonna go on a little spur here. Where is that? The FAL is that old. Yeah, I think you're Brazilian, right? Yeah, these have been around since the end of World War II. This has like it was developed around the same time as the AK-47. This came out in 1953, but the original prototypes, as we can see here, are from 1948. These were originally in the same cartridge as the Sturmgewehr 44 Nazi assault rifle, and they were later adapted in the UK. Like they were built in the UK but moved back to Belgium. All of these are very like these were like they were old enough to be used in active service from the early 1950s onward. So this would have been, and the Cuban army did use a lot of these at the time, so they would have been perfect for the time. Yeah, the FAL is that old. It is quite old. Honestly, a lot of like if you realize the AR was from the original AR is from Vietnam, which is it's a lot to take in. The original AR, and they did exist around that time, but they weren't fully anachronistic. And they weren't fully anachronistic, but they wouldn't have made sense to put them in Cuba. Carlos's rebels primarily use M1 Garand because the Brigade 2506. Yeah, something I was doing some research because I was like continuing a writing project that I myself have. I find it really funny that there is a town called Australia in the middle of Cuba, and it was used as Fidel Castro's base of operations during the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion. This would have been the Eliaqui Playa Larga. This is the Bay of Pigs. This is the Bay of Pigs, as you can see. This place is what Mason and because this is like a big sugar plantation. Australia, Cuba. This would have been this is the base that that Mason and company would have been hitting during the attack on Villa Clara in Operation 40 in this mission, which like if you realize you attack Castro's plantation and then you zip line all the way here into the beach where the onto the beach where the Bay of Pigs is occurring, where the invasion is occurring. Why aren't you like getting in a car and driving these? Okay, how far is this? That is 10 miles. That is 10 miles. You walk 10 miles through a sugar field to the beach in like 2 seconds, which is really funny. The frick, we're using Korean War leftovers. I mean, don't worry. Okay, Cielo. This did not see service in the Korean War. Most of the Korean War weapons are leftovers from World War II. The M1 Garand, the Mosin Nagant, the SVT-40, a lot of which do show up here, the SVT-40 and the M1 Garand. Those were the most common weapons during the Korean War. Basically the same as the most of World War II. If you like, most of the advances in weapons technology during the Korean War came from fighter jets, because they were like the first supersonic fighter jets, although they didn't see service during the war, and were fighter jets and tanks. For the most part, when it comes to guns and small arms, these did not get to see service until like these were invented in 1948, but they were rolled out into production in 1953. Now, I like being an American. Well, I'm not a gun owner yet, but I am interested in owning one. I was like, judging by this stream, I do have a friend who owns an FNFAL. Were there any exclusives in the Wii version? That I don't know. Ironically, despite me springing out about it, I have not played this game. I do really want to play it, and I could buy it because it's cheap, pretty cheap at the moment, but I don't have the space to play it. Brazil adopted these in I think the 1960s or 1970s, and they've been using them ever since. These are like Brazil uses a lot of different Cold War NATO guns. Brazil makes and uses their own, which is from the company Imbel in Brazil. Now, for the most part, because these were proven to be used both by the Cuban soldiers and by the Cuban army, the Cuban Revolutionary Army, and the Brigade 2506. Where is that? And Brigade 2506, which is Carlos's men. These were they were used in here, as well, because most of these plus Uzis would have been the most modern equipment available to the Cuban rebels during the Bay of Pigs invasion. Unfortunately, having this sweet new rifle did not save them. As I guess I can talk a little bit about history here, because to spice it up, so we're not just like rambling on and on about guns. Is that, yeah, the U.S. should have intervened during the Bay of Pigs invasion and just launched a full-scale invasion of Cuba. Well, as stated before, no, Mollington, I am not Latam. I'm Filipino. I'm American. God put me in the South for a reason, you know. He put me in the South. But as a Floridian, especially as a Floridian, I have met a lot of Cubans. I know a lot of Cubans. I like a lot of Cubans. They're like a very beautiful people. I love their culture. I love their style. It's like besides like Italy, and besides Italy, probably and the U.S. itself, Cuba is like one of the most interesting cultures that I like. I'm really fond of, especially during the Batista era. And I know a lot of Cubans, so in honesty, like we could have taken Cuba. We could have launched it like where's Puerto Rico? Yeah, Puerto Rico is here. We could have launched a multiple pronged invasion from from Puerto Rico, and surround attack from the Seventh Fleet from like not the Seventh Fleet, the what is it, the I'm trying to remember the fleet that we have in the Caribbean, but like attack from the U.S. Navy that we were supposed to engage. We were supposed to engage at this time. The during the this is the Cuban Missile Crisis came later, but then we were supposed to engage during the Bay of Pigs invasion, and I think we should have. It's one of the few wars that I genuinely think like the U.S. had every right to complete, had every right to engage, because like Castro yeah, Batista was a dictator, but he wasn't that bad of a dictator. He was just like he was there to like he was only cracking down because he really didn't have a choice. And Castro and Guevara, like the Castros and Guevara overthrowing his government was straight up foul play. There was clearly a dictatorship being established there, and having this active aggression on like as a regional neighbor should have justified grounds for a full-scale invasion. We should have engaged. In my opinion, I know I'm getting a little bit political here, but like, yeah, my heart bleeds for the Cubans, and and it's a shame that their country is still like this today. And your Latas, Filipina, Felix, Filipino is Latina. Take the W. The reason why it failed is because Kennedy didn't want to use more Air Force for plausible deniability. Yeah, speaking of which, something I noticed is, speaking of Air Force, in the game, your escape aircraft is the is a C-130, a C-130 Hercules. Is a C-130 Hercules. Like there were prototypes that existed during this time. This would not have been in use during the Bay of Pigs invasion. What I would have chosen instead is the Douglas DC-3, and the Douglas DC-3. This was a very pretty aircraft. This was in use during World War II. This flew during the 1930s, but it was still in use by as well into the 1980s, because it was such a popular, and it was such a well-used aircraft. It was such a popular and reliable aircraft that they kept using it for a very long while. This is the origin of the AC-47 in Vietnam, and instead of the M60 machine gun that we got in use, because where's that, the M60, instead of the M60 machine gun that we got in use here, which is anachronistic for Cuba, we should have got the M1919 Browning. the M19. We should have gotten one of these. This is a classic machine gun of the era. Of the variants, the M1919A6 or the 30 cal ANM2. Yeah, this is the aircraft version, which would have made sense to put on the Douglas DC-3, which would have made sense to put here as a defensive armament. The other choice I would have put is the Curtiss C-46 Commando, another really pretty aircraft. This was also used during the Bay of Pigs invasion in real life, which would have been screen accurate. These would have been accurate for the time, and it wouldn't and while it was a bit more conspicuous because this was a fully military aircraft, it was called the Commando for a reason. It was still a cargo aircraft that was in use by the Cubans at the time, so it would have made sense to have it as an escape aircraft. And to have it would have had it in use as an escape aircraft. And instead of the BTR, you get a T-34-85, which is a classic Soviet tank from World War II that was in use, that was widely credited actually, the Castro's T-34s of sweeping in, closing in on Playa Larga and surrounding the area, because the Bay of Pigs, the Brigade 2506 did not have heavy armor. They did not have I think they might have had technicals or something like that. Some kind of motorized attack element, but it would not be enough to directly storm the capital. There is a really interesting history of something I should cover called the Bacardi bomber. If you're familiar with the Bacardi brand of rum, and the stuff that they bought, which involves a A-26 invaders, and because there's a sequence in Operation 40 where they say, oh, the rebels have B-26 bombers and they're bombing Castro's villa. They're not shown in Operation 40. They're not actually shown. Instead, the Douglas A-26B, the A-26 Invader, this attack aircraft, this would have been used at the time as the primary attack aircraft by the Cuban rebels to take out Castro. This unfortunately isn't shown, but it is it is accurate for the time, and this really would have made a really good fit for a Black Ops kill streak, because as one of my kill streak suggestions. In the Invader, either a CIA Douglas A-26 counter invader or an on-mark marksman or a KGB Tupolev Tu-2 with a gun run plus bombing run. This would have been made a lot of sense. The Bacardi bomber. This was I guess I'm taking a little bit of a detour to talk about the Bay of Pigs invasion, but yeah, hot lady, maybe a little painted on the side of a plane with machine guns on it, and that is the and this aircraft, this is the Bacardi bomber, which was bought by Bacardi, the company, as in the rum company, to bomb Cuba and kill Castro. This was after the Bay of Pigs invasion. This was well into the 1970s, but this it's such a fascinating story, and because these planes were used by the CIA for fucking everything. They were used to smuggle drugs. They were used to attack the Viet Cong. They were used to supply Cuban rebels. They were used to to fight in African conflicts. And that's what I should do a mechanical marvels on the A-26 at some point, because it's such a beautiful plane. But yeah, that's enough about for Operation 40. Vorkuta. I don't know a lot about the real-life Vorkuta breakout, but in general, okay, so the in the game, the most common in the game, it's pointed out frequently that the where is that? KS-23. Yeah, the KS-23. These were depicted in use by the guards of the Vorkuta Gulag, as portrayed in Black Ops. These would not have existed at the time. Instead, I decided to depict it after the Winchester. Yeah, where the guns themselves are based off the Winchester model 1200. the Winchester Model 1200, which is essentially based off the 1912 anyway, which is why I gave them to those. Instead of these, which didn't exist at the time, I instead would have had them use the where is that? I forgot to put this one. The MTS 2112. This is a semi-automatic shotgun. This was a sporting shotgun, but it was a semi-automatic that was around during the time. It was in 12 gauge. So this would have been an accurate kind of representation of something the Gulag guards might have used. What might have used instead, responding soldiers will use the SVT-40, which was a I'm trying to find that one. Like you get these, you get American Air, yeah, Air America used a lot of A26s. Arasaka Militech build, yeah, it's really cool. Like Bacardi is but it's ironic. It's funny because Bacardi is both one of my favorite alcohols besides Jack Daniels, and it's one of my favorite, one of the most interesting companies in the world as a sort of the secret military history behind Bacardi. Yeah, the Vorkuta breakout didn't happen anywhere IRL. Matter of fact, it's been shut down since 1962. Yeah, the thing is with the Vorkuta breakout is I'm probably gonna look it up. Yeah, in Vorkuta Russian, this did exist. This did happen. Yeah, 57 killed, but this was a peaceful protest. This was basically a labor strike. This was basically a labor strike of the Vorkuta prisoners. They didn't actually fight back or start a rebellion, but my interpretation is that instead is that under what's his name? Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier at the time, would have attempted to shut down Vorkuta. The Vorkutlag. This is the original one. This is in my interpretation, because it was shut down in 1962. My idea is that in 1963, it was still I could have moved the honestly Vorkuta, it doesn't look accurate to the we're told it's Vorkuta Komi Republic in Russia. Yeah, this is where it is in Russia. It doesn't look like this is very far north. This is north of the Arctic Circle, but in game it's portrayed as in Black Ops 6 when you return to Vorkuta. When you return to Vorkuta, it kind of looks like it's very snowy. It's a winter level. It's a very snowy place, which is accurate because it takes place in January, in Black Ops 6. But in here, even in October, it would have been snowing a lot. So I was actually gonna change it to, actually instead of October 6, it would have been July 14th in 1962, which would have been more accurate, because I am doing a side project where I kind of rewrite and edit elements of Black Ops 1. It's a really good game. I'm not hating it as it's just like Black Ops 6. It had so much potential. It did have so much potential, but it's good on its own. That being said, I do want to I'm a sucker for history, and I wanted to make it more historically accurate. So yeah, Black Ops thing is that this is the real history of the Cold War. Yeah, in theory, Dragovich and Kravchenko would have had some kind of political sway, where they would keep the Gulag open for at least one more year until because they were performing as what Khrushchev might call national security, and a national security operation, or a military operation within the Gulag, which required the prisoners as some kind of test subject. As we know, Mason is later one of these test subjects. But for the guns, back to the guns, Winchester 1912s, MTS 2112s, Tokarev TT33s. This is itself in Black Ops. This was the Soviet counterpart to the 1911. It's both like an ugly and pretty pistol for the time. The Tokarev TT33, instead of the Makarov, they would have been equipped with these. They would have been equipped with these as their. A more accurate choice might have been the Nagant M1895 revolver, but I don't like the Nagant M1895 revolver because it's a nice looking revolver, but it's not a good gun. But so you get the TT33 semi-automatic pistol instead. This is what, instead of the Makarov, this is what the guards would have been using. They would have been using these, and they would have been using the where is that? PPSH-41. They would have been using the PPSH-41 either with drum mag or with stick mag. These would have been in use by the Gulag guards instead of the like. I think it's worth like the responding troops, because like the Soviet army would have been mobilized to put down the Gulag uprising. The Gulag uprising. They would have been using instead. They would have been using AKs and all at that time, but most of the backline troops, such as prison guards, because in Russia, prison guards are considered a section of the army instead of the police. They would have been using older World War II era surplus weapons for the most part. Yeah, Black Ops and it has an interesting revision history, because this page used to have a lot of like alternative suggestions for what the gun should have been. Instead of you get these instead of the AKs for the most part, which does fit, because Reznov, who you meet in Vorkuta, like Reznov's personal weapon was a PPSH-41. Well, it was a PPSH-41, which would have made sense for him to use at the time. And instead of the I guess a more appropriate one would have been the SKS, but I'm not the biggest fan of the SKS, so instead we have instead we're giving them these. We're giving them the SVT-40, which would have been the rifles in use by responding responding Gulag guards and everything like that. The Tokarev self-loading rifle, model of 1940. Yeah, these would have been the choice for most of the Gulag guards, as well as the PPSH-41. A lot of the elements of the prison break, Reznov's plan, as iconic as it is, I wouldn't want to change it. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, yeah, you secure one guy's keys. You don't think I don't think it would have been it's obviously like a power fantasy where you're enacting your revenge against the guards who have been torturing you, but that's not how a prison break would have worked. You would not have gotten any of that equipment, like, overall. If you wanted to break out of a prison like that, you would have had to secure a lot more keys. You would have needed to rebel against a lot more guards and all of that. It wasn't just, ooh, we can storm the armory and capture the weapons. Most of the prisoners would have been put down really instantly. I don't know how I would change it, because, I haven't broken out of a prison before, but, it just seems highly unrealistic, especially the sequence when you're like taking down the helicopter or using a slingshot or a catapult to launch Molotov cocktails. Instead of that, like, they would have been using some kind of dynamite bomb from the mines, in my opinion. Well, Outlast Trials. I'm not familiar with Outlast Trials. But yeah, in the Fist of Iron, something really funny is that this American machine gun, where is that? The under the name Death Machine, it is found at the level for Kuda in multiplayer is awarded as a kill streak award. Why is this why is this here? Why is an American weapon that hasn't been fielded yet in Vietnam, in a Russian gulag in 1961? So instead, I replaced it with the where's that? The 1946 Slauson, which is really interesting because we never see much of these at all. The 1946 Slauson machine gun, which was the from Soviet Russia around 1946. This would have been accurate for the time period 1946. This takes place in 1962. It should take place in 1962. And it would have this was essentially the Russian minigun for the time before they adopted a different design down the road. And having this like old prototype weapon in a gulag where it might have been used as by Dragovich or Kravchenko as weapons tests. Yes, skewer the winged beast. That's a really stupid moment. Instead of using the KS-23 with the harpoon, they should have been using some kind of tear gas mortar. This would not have made sense. Trust me, this would not have made sense. The dialogue implies this particular shotgun was modified by Mason. This did not exist during the time. Even if it did exist during the time, would it have worked? No, it would not have worked. Even if you did skewer the helicopter would literally just pull up. It would either snap the rope, like if it was affixed to the ground, the rope would have just snapped. If it was tied to if Mason was still holding on to the harpoon gun when it skewered the helicopter would have just ascended and taken Mason with it. It's like there really isn't a point to taking one down like this when you could have used just a mortar and explosives to take out the helicopter. But yeah, they would have used one of these instead of the Death Machine, instead of the M134, which would have made sense at the time, and another like interesting gun I think that the guards would be using is the Vovodin, which is one of these. This is one of the first Soviet-made double-stack pistols. This was only a prototype in World War II, but one of these was personally given to Stalin, from what I remember. This was one of Stalin's personal guns. Only a very few were made, but for the most part, these would have been the pistol choice for like if you wanted something other than the Tokarev, you would have kept on you one of these. And it would have been nice for Reznov to get his hands on one of these as well, because I guess it's implied that the guards of Vorkuta would be Stalinist sympathizers or like against Khrushchev and de-Stalinization. So having one of these would have fit their profile pretty well. So there's that. There is a mission that I think would have been really nice in between Vorkuta and USTD. That I could have been writing. To summarize Outlast Trials, it's about the Outlast series main antagonist Murkov's mind control experiments, in which regents are reborn after participating in traumatic trials into sleeper agents. It's an ongoing story that's currently set in 1960. That's interesting. I'm not familiar with it, but I might check it out at some point later. USDD, it's something I noticed because. Make the metal detectors look period accurate instead of the modern airport security metal detectors, which did not exist at the time. But they did exist during the time. They were invented in the 1930s. This is the one where you meet Kennedy, where it's like basically just a cutscene. In executive order, this one's a fun one. Because something that was cited inaccuracies in Black Ops 1. Oh, excuse me. So thank you to Volknet for sharing the same ideas. Something I would compare to, for the various Yeah, for the better choices, ASP for the Mason and Company, Browning High Power for the Cuban Army and Havana Police. This I replaced instead with the I replaced instead with the Walther PPK, the Colt Model 604, the USAF M16, the Colt Model 601. I replaced that with the M2 carbine, the RPK, the genuine M60 model. I replaced that with the M1919A4 or the ANM2 30 cal, and all of these I already covered those. I already covered these, the KS23s. Yeah, the SKS should appear in Vorkuta instead of the KS23 or the suggested IZH21. No, it was used by Soviet second line troops, internal troops. I instead replaced it with the MTS 2112 and the Winchester 1912. USAD, the Pentagon. For executive order, it made me realize something, which is something I wanted to bring up. A lot of the elements, like I said before, Metal Gear Solid 3 has a lot of visual identity with Black Ops 1 because it's set in the same era, it's set in the same decade. It has, both of them are anachronism machines where everything, a lot of the stuff that they discuss or show in these games simply did not exist during the time, like the Patriot and the Davy Crockett system did exist for you if the Furious Flamethrower. Mounted on all the Mi-24A helicopters in the game. These did not exist during any of the time periods in either game, but they show up in both of them anyway because it's so iconic. They show up in both of them anyway. Probably the best story in the series. In my opinion, that's Metal Gear Solid 2. Yeah, I'm a weird like that, but 3 is a classic. 3 really is a classic. But yeah, instead of one of these, it would have made sense during the time to have one of these, but not in use in Russia, not in use on the motorcycle chase, which is why I instead replaced it with the MTS 2112. I mean, because it's semi-automatic, you wouldn't have to cock the weapon. He wouldn't have to cock the weapon when he's on the motorcycle. He wouldn't have to do that Terminator flip cock or anything. And this would have been something that the guards were using, so it was likely that he could have picked it up himself. So for executive order, where is that? Executive SOG, where executive order in the Baikonur Cosmodrome. This would have been fun. I included the Carl Gustav M45 as I included the Carl Gustav M45 as the submachine gun for CIA operatives in the game because they did use them, but I decided it didn't have the kind of flair because it is kind of infamous for this section, for this part. MP5K serial number 1. Yeah, where Woods is using an MP5K in Baikonur Cosmodrome, which is in Kazakhstan. This did not exist. None of this existed during that time. Besides the rocket launch day being right, let's focus on the guns first. Oh, you mean trials? Oh, my bad. But yeah, overall, with Baikonur Cosmodrome and the presence of guns like this here, instead of the because this straight up again did not exist during the time. The MP5 as a platform was not developed yet, and neither was the red dot sight. So instead, it's one of these. It's one of these. It's such a weird looking gun, but it's so cool. This is everyone's familiar with the Mauser C96 if you've seen Star Wars, if you've played any World War II game that has these, or World War I game even that has these, like Battlefield 1. This would have been a really interesting choice, especially as these were common in Russia at the time as well, because so many. This was the most used pistol in the Russian Revolution. And what is this? A pistol from the 1800s doing in the 1960s? Well, I mean, do you have anything else? And besides, this was a modified. Yeah, this was specifically the M712 Schnellfeuer. The M712 Schnellfeuer. Cielo. See, it's Cielo. We're talking about Brazil. This is a gun from your country. Um, well, technically, this is ordered from Germany, from Mauser, but they modified it to have this foregrip and this stock, and it's really funny. It's really interesting because this was used as a submachine gun by the Brazilian police by the Rio police, and its presence here is really interesting. Um, it's technically anachronistic because these modifications didn't come out until around the 1970s. Where is that? The nickel model design led Mauser to further redesign the weapons. The improved mechanism being the military sale, a great commercial hit, notably in China and Spain. And so this was designed in the 1970s, but the materials to make it and everything, it will or a similar modification would have been around at least during the 1960s. So having the Mauser M712 and the Chinese, yeah. So having the Mauser M712 in this scenario instead of the and it's also Woods and Mason should have been dressing up at least in something a little bit more 60s themed because we hadn't hit that Vietnam era yet. Why is he wearing gear from Vietnam when we haven't entered Vietnam yet? I don't know. But having one of these having one of these and take the place of this would have been really nice. Over and add on like a suppressor and a scope and would have been perfect. And for the sidearm, because I am leading into the sort of 1960s unique. Oop. Oh, that comes in later. Sidewinder SMG, the Liberator CMG2, the George Wilson. Let me go find it. Instead of those, because the specific cartridge that I would have them chambered in would be 7.5 by 21 millimeter Swiss or 7.5 by 21 millimeter Parabellum, which is something because we have enough 9mm pistols in the game, having the Luger be in a different caliber would be really interesting. And this would have been to provide some level of plausible deniability as to why these these were American operatives, but they were using mostly German weapons, so they would have some kind of plausible deniability there. Having it be a Swiss Luger that they were using. Oh, ignore that. That's funny. Having it be a Swiss Luger or something that would have been that would with a suppressor on the end would have been really interesting. And what I would keep in executive order is the Colt Python is giving Mason's Colt Python a scope instead of the snub nose that we get later on in the games. Overall, executive order is just one of these missions where a mission is changed to reflect real history. Instead of attacking the Soyuz 1 and 2 launches, which didn't happen until 1967, they'd be hitting the Vostok 8 and 9 military test launches, which were intended to be launched as a pair, which makes sense in the game. And I'm not into bows as much as I am into guns, but I will mention it. Instead of the... Where is that? Instead of this crossbow, which is too tactical and it has too many features with modern crossbows, with modern tactical hunting bows, that instead instead of that, I decided we'll go instead with the Barnett Wildcat, which would have been new at the time, but it would have been appropriate for the era. Having it, especially with a scope like one of these, would have been really interesting. As that for the scope, this is For Your Eyes Only is another James Bond movie. This was released in the early 80s, but that crossbow would have been relevant in the 1960s, and I could see this because the Barnett Wildcat was used in real life by Serbian commandos during during the Yugoslav wars in the 90s. and so it would have made sense to use them there. And it comes with a scope as well, so it would have been really interesting. It would have been really nice, like that. Overall, moving on from that, Soviet troops make heavier use of the RPD and the Sechin APS. If you're not familiar with the RPD, then that is, where is that? I can find it probably. RPD? No, yeah, the Degtyarev RPD. This is not related to the 8K, but it came out in the same time period. This is what I believe. As much as I like Kalashnikov, this gun is what the Soviets should have been maintaining use of instead of the RPK, purely because, like, you know, you have that fire suppression capability. The SOG version of the Degtyarev is available to the American gunner class in this game. Yeah, this gun would have been really interesting to have in Black Ops instead of getting it in Modern Warfare, because, you know, it's a Russian machine gun. It's interesting enough on its own, but having them be present in the Soviet troops make heavy use of GRPD and Sechin APS. Or what is the Sechin APS? Let me show you, because that is we'll put the We'll look at that one as a reference point, and for this one, instead we'll be showcasing the Stechkin. Yeah, the Stechkin APS. It looks like a big Makarov, and it kind of is. It was not designed by Makarov, though. That being said, it is one of the prettier pistols to come out of the Eastern Bloc, the Stechkin APS, which is kind of why I prefer it over the PA-63 PM-63 rack. These were machine pistols in use by the Soviet Union during the time. These were issued to paratroopers and tank drivers and everything, and these would have been accurate to the era. So why do they only include these in Black Ops 6? These were in Black Ops 6, but why they weren't in Black Ops 1, I don't know why. Is that the extractor? Yeah, they would have been using one of these. Some of like the Soviet troops at executive order would have been using some of these. TKB 408s. Yeah, this is a real gun. Hold on. The TKB 408. This was a real bullpup rifle that competed against the AK during the post-World War II bullpup trials. These would have been I think these would have been a really interesting fit for Kravchenko's troops, for Kravchenko and Drogovich's special forces or the Spetsnaz that they were using at the time. At the time, they never used these, but because COD is really into showcasing obscure weapons, I think these, well, like, at least they should with some of the stuff that they're adding. I think some of these would have been this would have been really interesting for its time, and it's well known enough to be in the Division and Girls Front Line. So yeah, TKB 408 GFL. That's a waifu right here, not gonna lie. GFL, dude, that is a really nice character design. But we're here for the rifle, and if it's good enough for Girls Front Line, I think it's good enough for Call of Duty. So you're getting those, and as well as the PK machine guns, as we know. The PK. Where is that? Yeah, there we go. The PK. This was also designed by Kalashnikov. Everyone who's played Call of Duty or like seen or knows at least a little bit about Russian military history knows about one of these and knows what these are. Actually, something I forgot to mention. Instead of the because a lot of the in the Gulag Guards in Vorkuta, instead of the anachronistic and like out of place M249s, they would have been using Maxim guns. For the most part, they would have been using Maxim guns. Yeah, they would have been using these. Yeah, this is like really old. These were really old machine guns, but they would have been perfect for the time because a lot of these are still being used in Russia and Ukraine today. A lot of these would have been in use for Russia and Ukraine today. For the Maxim MG08. This was one, like, even though it's not a Russian design, it was one of Russia's first machine guns. So having it be present in Vorkuta would have fit, as well as the SG, the Gore. Where is that? The SG-43. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, the Gorionov SG-43. These would have been in use. These would have been in use by Vorkuta guards as well. Intended to replace the 1910 Maxim as a standard machine gun, it was replaced by the PK in the 1960s. So you have those. And something else that I noticed is, where is that? The GP25. I need to pick up the pace a little bit because we're only around a little bit in. Where's that? The GP. Yeah, the attachment, the GP30. This is anachronistic. This would not have been around at the time. The GP30 can be mounted on the AK and the Galil, as is incorrectly called a GP25, and its appearance is anachronistic. The GP30 entered service in 1989, and the earlier GP25 in 1978. I would have replaced these with the OG40. Armaguero. Yeah, the OG40 Iskra. This is what I was looking for. This would have been the mainline mount because these were the underbarrel launchers in use by the Soviets at the time. These would have been in use by the Soviets at the time, which would have made sense. Instead of like as the if you wanted a grenade launcher attachment, these would have been your best bet because they had the 43 millimeter. The 43 mil grenades for the AK at the time. It's really fun because I didn't know what these were before looking them up. I was looking for stuff that could fit and replace some of the weapons used in Black Ops, and finding this was really interesting because I didn't know these existed. These were built from like cut down mortars. They were given AK grips. You load them from the front and then you you break. They're break open. They're break action. You break them open. You load them from the back, and then you launch them. And so having them replace the GP25s would have been fun. And I went a little bit off the rails here because I started writing fanfic DLC or like, because look, okay, I'm gonna talk about the story a little bit. It starts in 1961 in game. In-game Vorkuta happens in 1963, and USDD executive order takes place in 1963. There is a 5-year gap in between 1963 and 1968. In 1968. What was Mason doing at that time? I'm not going to go into it directly now. That's probably going to be the subject of a reader's rant if like I was going to rewrite elements of Black Ops 1. It is a bit cringe. I'm supposed to be cringe but for cringe and free, but I'm supposed to be cringe and free, but for the most part, I don't think I'm going to showcase that. I'm just going to focus mostly on the guns. But something I noticed was in this gap between 1963 and 1968, what was Mason doing? Directly after the events of Executive Order, Kennedy gets assassinated that's straight up what happens. Kennedy gets assassinated in the game. Well, in real life, of course, and it's implied that Mason was responsible, at least either framing or posing as Lee Harvey Oswald. And leading into that theory, oh, excuse me, I had to pick up something. Leading into that theory, um, what would Mason have used? Like, yeah, it's stated in game that he uses a like he would have used the Carcano to match with Oswald, JFK, because if you're like for those unfamiliar, this is a bolt action single shot pistol in 223. Like the main one is in 221 Fireball, which is a proprietary cartridge, but they could be rechambered for 223, which is the same round the AR-15 shoots. According to this one conspiracy theory, the James Earl files, the James Sutton files, Files gave interviews that he was the grassy knoll shooter in the 1963 assassination of the U.S. President John F. Kennedy. He said he took one shot at Kennedy with the Remington XP100 Fireball gun, which is this bolt-action sniper's pistol. So, Felix, you think the CIA did it? Abso-fucking-lutely. Actually, I think Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, and he had his own motives for doing so. And I think, um, uh, Actually, I think Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone with his own motives, and he was motivated by nothing else other than personal hate and want for fame, even though he was killed directly after by Jack Ruby, and despite being on the FBI's radar as a KGB agent, as like a potential KGB agent, why wasn't he investigated? Yeah, this is like I don't think this is the cause. I'm pretty sure. See, like if there were I'm pretty sure there were multiple shooters, and I'm pretty sure the end result was done with a Mauser instead of a Carcano, because everyone recorded the rifle being used to kill Kennedy as a Mauser. On site, this could have been misidentification, but still. Which was the final fatal headshot, which infamously caused Kennedy to jerk violently back into the left, which is why I included, like in bad taste, the single shot pistols, the Remington XP100, as an option for this sort of high powered pistol. And I think right now we'll cover all the guns that aren't going to show up in. You know what? No, I'm going to continue on with showing off what I would replace all the guns in the campaign with. Have you watched the Lamino video on it? I have not. I plan to watch the Wendigoon video on it, on the JFK files. I have not watched Lamino in a while. But going back to and utilizing because a lot of the stuff that I planned face to face, Gordon River on the Finnish-Swedish border, which is something, in my opinion, like, would Mason have just shot JFK and stewed at his, like, this hardened CIA veteran assassin, Alex Mason, would have shot JFK, returned home to Washington, returned to work on Washington, D.C., and then stewed at his desk for multiple years until he was sent to Vietnam? No, he wouldn't. In my opinion, you know what? I'm gonna be cringe but free. He's going to be sent on like face to face, which is like a fan made mission that I think would tie together the narrative together pretty well. After he returns home from executive order from the Soviet Union with Woods and Bowman and Weaver, Mason enters a fugue state. And because this happens only a few days before the assassination, this happens 5 days before JFK's assassination. For those 5 days, like for a while, Mason pulls it off, and then enters a fugue state. If you're familiar with what a fugue state is, it's a sort of like you're hallucinating for a while. You enter this sort of coma, where you don't remember anything that happens, and you're kind of in this permanent dreamlike state. You're in a trance, but you continue to do everything normally. You basically your brain runs on autopilot. It's happened to a few people before. It's one of those things that you hope never happens to you, but it's happened before to people. And I think as a result of the brainwashing Mason experience, he would have entered a fugue state and then ended up on this because he was intended to be some kind of he was intended to be this in KGB or like GRU, Dragovich's man on the inside. He was supposed to be Dragovich and Kravchenko's man on the inside. So he would have been I'm sorry, I am like fidgeting a little bit. In the Finnish-Swedish border. Why here? Because I think it was interesting because this allows them to operate in on the Finnish-Swedish border. This would allow them, because both of these are neutral countries in the Cold War. Sweden and Finland were vaguely NATO aligned, but they were officially neutral they were officially not aligned in the Great Power Struggle. And having a Soviet safe house be here, or actually a KGB safe house operating out of a hunting lodge in the Finnish-Swedish border, in hopes of mainly due to Kravchenko, because we know in executive order that Kravchenko got away before Mason could catch him. So, and Mason travels to this place in order to receive orders from Kravchenko, and then he just wakes up. And in the middle of a struggle, he just wakes up in the middle of a struggle with, like, because he suddenly wakes up and he has to fight his way out while figuring out what the hell happened to him and where he's been. This is the first sign of, like, maybe I was drugged, what happened to me, and we're essentially, at this point, Mason has gone rogue, in my opinion. And from there, we're going to look at some of the guns that I would have put in for this, which is This was a common choice for a gun that should have showed up in Black Ops, the Carl Gustaf M45. This would have showed up in the Vietnam levels, but it's a Swedish weapon, so it would have appeared on that border. It would have appeared on the border. The Carl Gustaf M45 and the Egyptian Port Said, which is or I think that's how it said, the Port Said. This would have showed up in those sections. This would have shown up in those sections, as well as the, where is it, the KP, as well as the Suomi KP31, but instead of the more iconic KP31 here, as shown here, because the Carl Gustaf instead takes the 9mm SMG slot. Something I wanted to show off is the earlier Suomi KP26, which would be in the same caliber as which would have been in the same caliber as the the M712 Schnellfeuer that was showcased earlier in this stream, the 765 by 21 Luger. This one would have been an interesting choice because we don't see this a lot in most media. It's only in enlisted, but having that apply as like a modern like configuration stock, something like that, where I know these were produced, and I know these were produced a lot more, but having this option, especially with the distinctive magazine, would have been really interesting as a weapon. Having that as well as the where is that? The AK-4, which is not an AK. Which would have been, this is the Swedish version. This is the Swedish version of that rifle. In my opinion, like all these KGB agents operating in that area would have been using locally sourced weapons anyway, in order to ensure plausible deniability. Closest city in Lapea, Finland. Mason on Christmas leave, confirmed rogue asset by potentially compromised by the Soviets. But yeah, face to face would have had these. This is why there would be so much. They would have been using AKs as well, only through the Swedish imported ones. Not the Swedish, the Finnish imported ones, as well as the RK62. The RK62. 1965, this would have been semi-anachronistic, but you could have AKs fill this role because this is essentially an AK variant. This is, if for those in the know, this is an AK variant that spawned the Galil. And then I think, is there anything else that I have to cover that I would have replaced the some guns with? Oh yeah, the SA-20, the SA-24 and 26. That would have been in use by the This would have been in use by the Cubans as well as the North Vietnamese later on, as the to show this off as a visual reference. These would have been used because the Cuban army did use these a lot in 7.62 Tokarev, as well as where is that? What else am I showing off? The SA-23. And the CZ-52, which is one of my favorite Eastern Bloc pistols. It's got a chunky ass grip, but it's, in my opinion, perhaps the best pistol to come out of the Eastern Bloc besides maybe the Makarov. Well, the Makarov is mid, but this one is like really pretty. And this would have been the choice for elite Cuban officers as well as elite Soviet officers at the time. For those who could purchase their own weapon, it would have been one of these. In my opinion, it's such a nice gun with such like, it has really nice lines that I like. This is my kind of weapon. It has some really pretty lines to it. And then the next one, I decided to put in. Is someone downstairs? I don't know. For the next one is Cold Case, which is another, I guess, fan-made. Another fan-made level setting that I put in Cold Case, which would have taken place in Switzerland, and it would have involved the main pistols in level would have been some of these, because in my opinion, why is Mason in Switzerland? Why is he there? Well, in general, in my opinion, Mason would have gone AWOL from here, and he would have made his way to Switzerland, where I guess, well, I need Call of Duty games are all like the story is there to justify the action set piece, but the stories can be good. For Cold Case, I'm putting it in Switzerland in order to for Cold Case, I am putting it in Switzerland, and we're getting one of these. We're getting some of these pistols which were in use at the time, the SIG P210, as well as the Swiss Luger, as well as the Swiss Lugers that we were mentioning here as like an alternative. These would have been in use by Soviet agents operating within the vicinity, in my opinion. As well as, yeah, the SIG P210. This is a really nice gun. It's not exactly my type. I prefer the 1911, but this is just one of those guns that's so, like, a lot of people have recommended it because it's really a target shooting gun that happened to be adopted by the military, which is why that's there. The SIG P210 and the where do we lean into that? Yeah, where's that? Solotherm MP34. Yeah, this was designed in Austria, but some of these would have been in use by the I guess Swiss police or Swiss agents that were or like Soviet agents that would have been operating in Switzerland. Especially as this is a gun that was invented during, like, right before World War II, during the interwar period. It looks a lot like the MP18, but these would have been, in my opinion, the premier choice for some kind of it's fun because there's not a lot of side-loading SMGs. I prefer and they're ugly but pretty in their own way. As the French call it joli laid. I think that's what it's called. But these it's ugly and pretty at the same time. It's got that diesel punk look, and it's accurate because an exceptionally well-made weapon. It was used by some forces well into the 1970s, which this takes place in the 1960s, so it would have been a perfect choice. Yeah, it was so well manufactured that it became nicknamed the Rolls-Royce of submachine guns. So, Vietnam. This could have been used in Vietnam as well, in the Vietnam sections as well. So we'll keep that in mind. And But on that note, the other SMG that I'll be that I would like to show is the SIG MKM-0. This is the other one. This one was designed in Switzerland, and would have been produced 1943 to 1941. I guess relevant to some stuff or unfortunate recent events that's going on. These were in use by the Vatican, of all people. The SIG MKM-0 SMGs, these carbine-sized SMGs, submachine guns were in use by the there's someone downstairs, by the Swiss Guard, by the Papal Guard at the time. So having these in Switzerland would have been an interesting appearance. These were, ironically enough, in use by the Finnish army as well, and it's in this caliber, 7.65 by 21, which would have been my choice for kind of spicing things up a little bit, but introducing a new caliber into the mix. At this point, Mason returns to the U.S. under heavy scrutiny from Hudson. In 1967, Mason continues the rogue mission and follows the lead on Kravchenko. This is another mission that I wrote, Suez. This is like a fan made mission, which is why I included a few things in Port Said, which is literally the name of the Carl Gustav M45 variant that we showed earlier. Of the Carl Gustav M45, it would be one of these. A lot of the the Egyptian Port Said, and so setting it in Suez. This is something I liked, like you said, Big Yike. The Black Ops whole thing is that this is the real history of the Cold War, and for the sake of the Cold War, I would have put Mason during these in-between missions between the Kennedy missions in Vietnam. I would have put Suez and in between the Kennedy missions in Vietnam, I would have put him in the 6-Day War. This is, I understand, talking about, I won't comment on the current political situation involving these countries, but the 6-Day War was between Israel versus everyone else around it, versus Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. Israel ended up winning, and this would have portrayed Mason as making the hard choice. As, again, I don't want to get too political, but since we're discussing history, it's kind of an inevitability. So at this time, there's this guy called Otto Skorzeny, which was of all people, a former Nazi who ended up allying with Israel for whatever reasons both of them had. He ended up allying with them for a while, and during the 6-Day War, his group, the Paladin group, would have been relevant for the Israelis during this time. And Mason, looking for leads on Kravchenko and Steiner, in my opinion, would have made the trip to Israel, or it made the trip specifically to Egypt in order to make contact with these guys, carry out a mission on their behalf, which is hitting a Soviet Navy destroyer, which was a real destroyer that was involved in the 6-Day War. And you'd have these, and you would have the mission take place, and I guess visually some of the stuff that was going on would have the Uzi, would have the we would have the Uzi showed off here, as shown here. Um, something I hope that that they put in the stock, but having the Uzi be the primary for at least one mission would have been really fun, especially in Suez, and this would be portraying both the Paladin group, which would have been using, where is that? I guess leaning into the sort of, where is that? Mafia 3, where's that? Yeah. Paladin group would have been using, where is that? The MP54. This is where this would have been an option if you picked it up off of a dead Paladin group member, who you're supposed to be fighting alongside of all people with. This would have been their choice, as I guess this was a prototype at the time. Well, first adopted by the German Federal Police in 1968. This takes place. This would have been the 6-Day War would have taken place in 1967. So I guess it's not out of the question that they would have had with some of these SMGs as the original MP5. They would have had them for a special naval operation. I think it would have been fun. I think it would have been fun to see that, for that to be your first impression of it, as well as your Uzi as your primary. And the Walther P38 with suppressor. The Walther P38 kind of shows up as a recurring element that I would have liked to have. The Walther P38. This was the standard for the Germans during World War II. And this would have been in a lot of locations during Black Ops 1, from Vietnam to from Europe to Vietnam to some places in excuse me, I have to put something away. This would have been pretty much everywhere in it's not as common as the high power, but since Germany didn't need to use these as much anymore, a lot of these fell into random hands for various factions around the world, and having this as be an alternative option to the 1911, the Browning high power, would have been really interesting. And I think for a German faction such as Paladin Group, they would have been using them as well. The Sayeret McCall would have been using the FAL, the AK, and the Beretta Model 70, which I want to show off here. This would have been the sidearm for the Israelis, at least as a suppressor host. Beretta Model 70, these ones, because the Israelis did use these around this time. Early crossbow safety. That's interesting. Yeah, the Beretta Model 70 for them, the PPK for the Germans as well, as we saw there, and the RPD, the PK, the Makarov and Sechkin APS. We've shown those off before for hitting the Soviet destroyer. The Paladin Group, the HK T223, the G3. We've taken a look at the G3 before, as the earlier versions of the G3. Yeah, with wooden furniture. This would have been the choice for Paladin Group. HK-33. And this is what it would have been their standard assault rifle during the amphibious operation, which is the HK-33 or the T223 by Harrington and Richardson, which was a U.S. import version at the time. The Walther PPK, and the Egyptian army has one of the most interesting smatterings of guns that I would have incorporated. The Remington 870 shotgun, which would have been popular at the time. Everyone knows what the Remington 870 looks like. It's a really classic pump action. This is what the Egyptian, because they're still in use today. I've fired one of these before. They're really nice. They're one of the prettiest guns I've shot. But they're the classic double-barreled shotgun. I mean, they're the classic pump-action shotgun, and I think that would have filled a nice role, having the Egyptians be the enemies for a while. Not that I have anything against Egypt, but this would as a because of the real history behind it, having like because the Egyptian army had some of the most interesting lineups of weapons at the time. This would have been their choice, and the Colt Trooper as well. I haven't covered was the revolvers. Um, so previously before I stated that the Cuban police would have been using a the Smith and Wesson Model 19, which is the or the Smith and Wesson Model 13. These were in use by the FBI for a long while until the Miami shootout. This was in use by the FBI for a long time, and and as well as the Model 19 would have been the revolvers of choice for like as an alternative to the Colt Python. And speaking of the Colt Python, something I would have given like Mason. Something I would like, of course, Mason already has these in game. This is probably my favorite revolver of all time. It's such a pretty weapon. I have a guy in a server called Random Perv. If you've seen him around in some of the servers I've been in, he apparently owns. I think he owns either a Colt Anaconda or a Colt Python. He used one of these, and this is also Mason's gun during the game. This is like his sort of standard sidearm throughout the game. I give him a Walther P38 later on because I like that gun as well, and I think he needs a semi-automatic. But as a revolver, these are really pretty. And related are the the Rolls Royce of Colts. So the similar in size to the Colt Trooper. This is the later version. I would have had the Egyptian police and military be using some of these as this sort of at least the Egyptian army or like some kind of officer corps be using these because not that it because the Egyptian president at the time, Anwar Sadat, was using a Python, which is the more expensive variation. Meet with Skorzeny and Sharon aboard the Kit Roast, interrogate Arkoff. And I guess rounding out is the Beretta M1951. The Beretta M1951. These were yes, the Tariq. These are the Tariq pistols. These were in use by Iraq and Egypt. These were these were these were called the Hell ones, I think. Yeah, the Hell. Instead of the Egyptian Hell one. My mistake. I called it the Tariq. I called it the Tariq because of my familiarity with the Iraqi version. But this version, which is in my opinion also one of the more underrated guns that Beretta has put out. If I was in Vietnam, I would have been carrying one of these as a private purchase because like I just really like them. The Beretta M1951. This is a single action only version, like a single action only derivative of the Walther P38, which would have been in my opinion one of the better choices. These were in use by Egypt, and you can see like it's got the gold medallions on it, it's got silver medallions on it, it's got all that plating on it, and it's ooh, I've got a scratch in my glasses. But yeah, overall, I think one of these would have been a really nice choice as an enemy weapon in Egypt, as well as the, where is that? A VZ61 Scorpion. Where is that? Were these in use at the time? Yeah, it would have made sense. These were in 32 ACP. A lot of people were using 32 ACP. If you played a COD game, you know what this is. This is like the baby submachine gun in use by the Czechs, and like all the Russians use it, but it was invented in Czechoslovakia. Having one of these being used by them would be really interesting. And finally, rounding out the weapons here is the FN. The FN model 1949, which these were the standard battle rifle in use by Egypt at the time. These were semi-automatic. These were semi-auto only, although Egypt did order full auto ones. These were an 8mm Mauser, which is the same ones used by the Mauser rifles in World War II. Not widely used, as surplus M1 Grands were widely exported at the time, but it was used by Belgian forces in the Korean War. These were, because the FAL wasn't around yet. These would have been in use by the Egyptians for a while, as well as the original AK-47, either a Type 1, like, I guess the most common one would be a Type 2 or a Type 3. I think the Type 2 would have been like the prettiest option. Would have been the prettiest option from an aesthetic standpoint only. And it would have made the most sense because it's, I think, interchangeable with most other magazines at the time. Yeah, because I know the Egyptians and the Israelis were using those. And in Holdouts, which is, I guess, a more Quentin Tarantino-inspired one, where you meet up, where you're, like, hunting down a bunch of former Nazis in order to find Steiner. This is interesting, because I did include several Spanish guns as well. Artis Grozeni's loadout, and, like, Colt Python with scope. Walther P38 gets handed off to you in this sort of fan-made level made by me. Like, that I would have written in. Holdouts. In Holdouts, you get, you end up getting something really interesting, where let me pause the BGM because this is too funny. This needs to be experienced. The bad guys get you one of these.
Yeah, that's one fine looking barbecue pit. Why doesn't mine look like that?
La Coruña Arms Factory in 1943. This was basically the Spanish version of the Sturmgewehr 44. This is the variant that I would have this is interesting and all, but this is the variant that I would have showcased in Holdouts in that level as the Spanish weapon. Yeah, this is the one that I would have showcased, and let me resume the Yeah, I am keeping on rambling a little bit, but you know, it is weapons found in level. It would have been used by the bad guys here. Level is inspired by Quentin Tarantino and the Million Glorious Bastards and spaghetti westerns at the time, because it's filmed in not filmed, but that level that I proposed that took place there would have taken place in Almeria in Spain, which would have been in Almeria in Spain, which is known for like both Middle Eastern architecture and for being a stand-in in a lot of Western movies for Texas. Because if a lot of like Europeans wanted to film a Western, like an American cowboy movie, but they couldn't travel to America, they would film here in Spain. And a lot of the stuff would have been, well, they're P38. You would have gotten the STG-44. You would have gotten some of these, of course, because you know you're fighting Nazis. You might as well have them fight them with the Nazi thing. The STG-44 and the MP40. The MP38, yeah. And of course these classic SMGs that would show up later in the Vietnam levels, in my opinion. Popular culture has portrayed the MP40 as the most common weapon in the hands of German soldiers during World War II, and I guess as also the Gerat 06 from the Soviet oddity. I showed these off at the beginning. I'll show those later. Where is that? Talk STG-44. This is a variant of the Sturmgewehr 44 that I find really interesting, which is the Soviets took, like, they had so much Sturmgewehr 44s after the war that they decided to mock them up as M16s for film productions, and I think in multiplayer this should have been in multiplayer, if you get the STG-44, you could put an attachment like this on it, which gave you this like funky carry handle and the fake charging handle, as well as the AK front sight, or the AK or SVD front sight, which is made to look like the M16. These would have been fun to have as a sort of stand-in for the M16, mocking more the AR-10. The AR-10 would show up later on. This is the more logical choice for the Cuba levels, because the Cuban army, like even Castro himself, briefly attempted to purchase AR-10s, which would have been interesting as an OP4 kind of weapon. Custom M16 and 1's. Yeah, these rifles actually mocking more the AR-10, not the M16. Those would have been fun. Those would have been fun to see, as well as these FAL variants in use, because like the Soviets made a bunch of these where they would mock up certain guns as different guns, and where putting AR or FAL furniture on the Sturmgewehr 44 would have allowed you to use attachments intended for those guns, in my opinion. Anyway, the Gerat 06H. This is another one that would have been present in the Spain levels, in the Spain levels that I talked about. This is the Sturmgewehr 45, which was never actually made in Germany during the war, but it was actually produced in Spain after the war. This is a reproduction, so having one of these around would have been a fun option that I think that Black Ops 1 could have had. That I think Black Ops 1 could have had, because even like it's an awkward looking gun, but it is a really pretty rifle in my opinion. The Gerat 06H, and the that comes in later on. The Gerat 06H, and finally, something I wanted to show off, which is in the game actually, which is one of the rare weapons that makes sense to be in game, is, where's that? The Walther MPL, one of the available SMGs. Despite being one of the very few period appropriate guns, the MPL is not available in the single player campaign. It should have been. This would have been perfect for the Spain levels alongside the MP40 and the MP54, and it would have also made a lot of sense. It also would have made a lot of sense for the later German ones. And the last ones that I wanted to cover for the Spanish ones are like a stark difference from like the sort of World War II Wolfenstein inspired ones are the Sterling Mark IV, like the Sterling submachine gun. If you've ever watched Star Wars, you know what these are. If you've ever watched Star Wars, you'll be familiar with the Sterling. These, because Spain did use these, or at least variants of these, the Spanish militia. These would have been perfect for that kind of setting, where if a lot of bad guys were chasing you in a Spanish setting. Sterling Mark VI, the Set-Me C2. It's supposed to stand in for the Set-Me C2 at least. And there's the C1 and the MGC Sterling. Set-Me C1 and the MGC Sterling. I'm just reading off the page, but these would have been a really interesting choice for the time period, especially as a lot of this and the full stock variation of the the Sterling Mark V would have been a fun weapon to use as a sort of, if you had some British input, because these were British weapons. And rounding those out are Kar 98Ks as the sniper rifle of the game, because a lot of the Gewehr 98 Sporter and the Kar 98K would have been in use by a lot of the factions here, namely in Spain and in Spain and in Vietnam. A lot of enemy soldiers, a lot of Viet Cong would have been using captured Kar 98Ks provided to them by the Soviets. So that's their sniper rifle. And of course, because this is supposed to be set in Spain in the part that looks the most like Texas, I decided. Oop. I decided, we're gonna get the. I guess we'll use the Metal Gear the Metal Gear version for this one. We're gonna get Mason with a Colt single action army. We're gonna get him one of these, and like again because this is like a lot of the Western guns, the 18. The Winchester model 1894 and the 357 Magnum, these would have been in use alongside the Colt Trooper as a sort of, because in Spain I remember there were people that were using the Colt Trooper as well as the Smith & Wesson Model 13. The Winchester 94 would have been an interesting choice to have, especially because of this sort of pseudo cowboy setting that we're getting at. As a sort of pseudo cowboy setting, and I think that would have been fun having because especially during this time during the 1960s, this was at the time where Western movies were at their peak, during the 60s and the 70s, and these ones and like. Didn't a lot of Western productions film on the island near Corsica? I think they could. Is it near Sardinia? I'm not sure. But, in my opinion, despite it being like not a Wild West game, the single action army would have been a perfect choice for Black Ops because like a lot of Western guns restarted production. Like Colt started making repros of these. Winchester started continuing with the lever action rifle series because these were so popular in Westerns. If you look at if you look at a fistful of dollars. This took place. This was filmed in 1964, which would have been a really high point for SA artillery. The Colt single action army, for the Great Western Arms, they would have had that. They would have had the Great Western 45 Derringer, something like this, or something like these. It would have been fun as a sort of, I guess, a sort of Western flavor because the 1960s was so popular for the Western at that time, and a lot of these would have been the Ruger Blackhawk as well, and the Ruger Bisley, and the Ruger Bisley. Liaison, Frankfurt, West Germany. In that, I already discussed a lot of German weapons, but this would have taken place in East Germany as well, so a lot of Soviet and US weapons at the time, specifically the M14. Now, a lot of the one portrayed in game is not accurate. Is semi-automatic only. The in-game model bears heavy resemblance to the M418A2, M14A1 LMG variation. I would have just put in the regular M14. That's why they were called spaghetti westerns, because they were filmed in Italy. Yeah, I know a lot of the production crew for westerns were Italian, but from my recollection, a lot of them were filmed in Spain. But for the M14, luckily for like a lot of my suggestions, the M1 Garand and a lot of the World War II weapons are already in the game. It's just only in zombies. The M14. Having the M14 there, as well as what I would consider something fun. Let me go find it. Oh, that's later on. I'll show a spoiler alert for the second one, for another section of something I wanted to show off. The Winchester LMR. Yeah, the evaluation of the Winchester LMR. This was a 5.56 counterpart. This was a rival to the M16. When M16A1 trials were getting controversial, Winchester tried to step back into the game by producing one of these, which is a little known relative to the highly successful M1 carbine. The LMR was based on the carbine's immediate predecessor, the Williams carbine. Yeah, this would have been in 5.56 as well. 224E2, next one, early 222 special. This would have been Bruce Canfield on the Winchester LMR. These would have been this would have been a really interesting choice as an alternative to the M16 in West and East Germany, because U.S. Army units, like, despite it being around, U.S. Army units were not being equipped with the M16 during that time. In East Germany, in West Germany, the U.S. Army units would not be equipped with those at the time, so they would have been used. So having that as an alternative would have been interesting. And finally, the Vietnam levels. This is where it gets fun. XM16A1 and Remington 870 replacing the M16 with underbarrel. LPO-50s are in use by Viet Cong and NVA forces, which is a kill streak I came up with called the LPO-50. LPO-50. These were in use by the Soviets during World War II. While these were in use by the Soviets during World War II. There's fictionalized variants that show up in Far Cry. Mini 14, that is not a Mini 14. That was made by Ruger several years later. This is the Winchester LMR. Yeah, what if the Mini 14 had arrived over a decade earlier and had been a pound lighter? So this was technically going to be a better rifle than the Mini 14. It just was never released commercially because they were so focused on a military contract. I prefer the AR to this greatly, but I think it's a really interesting rifle regardless, and having that in Black Ops would have been fun. LPO-50 in use by the Viet Cong. The U.S. forces use M8 and M2 flamethrowers, which is the M8 flamethrower, which was this bulky, massive fucking thing by the Army Chemical Corps that looks so interesting. This giant, massive two pipes strapped together spraying flame. That's such an interesting. Like, how did they come up with these at the time? It's interesting, but I do know where they did come up with it is the Lancia Fiamme Mod 41. These were in use by Italy during World War II, and I think this could have made an appearance during the Spain levels because the Germans used them as well. The Lancia Fiamme Mod 41, which they did include as part of the flamethrower. The Lancia Fiamme Modello 41 and the M8, as well as the M2A12 on the US side. The M2A12, which is like your classic flamethrower or something like this, or the M9A1, the portable backpack flamethrower, which would have been really cool as a kill streak in Black Ops, for something like Black Ops. The greater concentration of those. Gun-wise, available weapons will include the M2 and M8 flamethrower, AR-10s, which they didn't see active service in Vietnam, but we've seen them already. The AR-10 Portuguese, like the Dutch or the Portuguese versions, these would have been really interesting to see in the original Black Ops. These would have been really fun to watch for something like these. Even though they didn't see official service in Vietnam, I think with the sort of artistic licenses that were granted by it being a COD game, that would have been really fun to have. Colt CMG2s, where is that? Yeah, Colt CMG2. This would have been an alternative to the M60, because Colt was trying to market these during Vietnam as a companion piece to the M16. So these would have been pretty good. Is that a holdout weapon? Mini 14. Is that a holdout weapon? The Lancia Fiamme, the Mod 41. These, I don't think so, but they inspired a later one called they inspired the 1's Flammenwerfer 46, which would like if you're familiar with the hold on, something I would like to show. The flamethrower attachment. Yeah, this is like this mounted underbarrel. These would have been the perfect like real world model to base it off of, or especially this earlier variant, because these were German one shot use like spray can style flamethrowers where you just take the cap off, you would spray the flame, and then you would dump it. And I think having that as an underbarrel attachment to the rifles would be a really fun addition. For the U.S. troops to be using the aforementioned M45s as well as the M3. This is like a really fun thing that I mentioned in Black Ops 6. This was invented during World War II, but its service lasted the entire Cold War. This was in use by U.S. troops from I think 1942 through 1992 as the entirety of the Cold War. The U.S. were using these. Even when it already switched away from the 1911, we were still using these. It looks like World War II Italy was just taking L's. They had some good ideas when it comes to military equipment. They just couldn't really. They weren't very good at fielding an army. Yeah, and the NTAC missile, and something else that I really noticed that I noticed and really hated. Actually, you know what? I'll focus on something else at the moment. RPG-2s, M2 carbines, and M14s. NVA forces will drop AKs, RPGs, RPG-2s. The RPG-2, which this was the direct predecessor to the RPG-7. This would have been in use by I think not necessarily Cubans, or going out of the rocket launchers available. The RPG-2, this would have been in use by the Soviet side and by the North Vietnamese side. The RPG-2, the Carl Gustav M2, which was in the M67. This would have been the American counterpart, the M67 recoilless rifle. This was used as an anti-tank weapon throughout most of Vietnam, and I think I would give you one in this level to replace the I would ideally give you one in this level to replace the China Lake. M2 carbine NVA forces will drop K50Ms and where is that? The blind aside. The RL-83 blind aside, which would have been another interesting launcher to have. This is a derivative of the original bazooka, which was in use by Cuba and in minor use probably by the US at this time. I think they would still have some of these in inventory that you could use. I love the massive blast shield in front of the user. And the Panzerschreck, Carl Gustav M2, and another one that I wish they were portrayed the North Vietnamese as having as the K50M. These would have been in use heavily by the North Vietnamese, and during the Vietnam sections of Black Ops. It would have been interesting to have these, or at least a regular PPSH-41, and the MAP-49 as well. The MAP-49 as well. These are French. These would have been left behind. These would have been left behind by the French in Indochina during the Indochina War. And I think another wasted opportunity that Black Ops 1 could have had with diversifying the kinds of SMGs it could have had. You'd have really interesting setups like these and these and these. And finally, the not yet, the mass for Finally, the MAS 49. These would have. This is one. Oh, I thought someone was calling me. These would have been pretty common, at least in. These would have been pretty common in Vietnam at the time. It looks like what no. These little carbines, or at least launching, or these little carbines and rifles, these would have been common in the Vietnam at the time because the French had dropped off a lot of these when they lost the war in Indochina, and we picked it up again. This is another one of my favorites that I wish there were more of in the surplus market because it's such an interesting weapon. It's direct impingement. It's like the AR-15. And it has that bulged out magwell receiver that I really like in a gun. And as well as the bolt action version, the MAS 36. The MAS 36, this would have been used by the Viet Cong as well. I think these would have made an interesting companion weapon to the MAS 49, especially as something like a sniper rifle. As the MAS 49. And something else that I would like to point out: World War II German weapons in the Vietnam War. They would have been used, like in here. It's usually shown as MG43, MG34s. I would have them using MG42s for the most part. The North Vietnamese and the North Vietnamese army, at least. The North Vietnamese army, at least, for the MG42s in use by the North Vietnamese. The Sturmgewehr 44 was also in use by the North Vietnamese as well, although not as common. They did make a lot of appearances. Here, a captured Viet Cong STG-44, and as well as what I would like to show here, the FG-42. The FG-42, that's in the FG-42. This would have been an interesting but accurate choice for the Vietnamese during the Vietnam sections like SOG. This would have been a fun counterpart. And finally, where is that? Oh, the Type 63. The Type 63 rifle. This would have been a substitute for the SKS. Something like these, because these were built off of the SKS kind of, but they were meant to feed AK mags. These were made by China, and these were provided a lot to the North Vietnamese during Vietnam. This was made during China's shortage of AKs when they were trying to phase out the SKS, and they instead got these instead. Okay, something going on to the thing that bugs me during the mission. You get on a Jeep with a tow missile, the Jeep is fine, the Willys Jeep, Woods' Jeep, but I ended up replacing it with a Cadillac Gauge Commando. One of these, which would have entered service recently at that time. At least let me find one. These would have been in use by Vietnam, by military police and that kind of thing. Yeah, this sort of the war wagon, this kind of vehicle would have been interesting to drive around in the Vietnam sections. And the NTAC missile replaces the anachronistic BGM-71 TOW. The TOW missiles did not exist back then, but the French NTAC missile. The French NTAC missile, which did exist at the time, these did exist. The NTAC as the anti-tank weapon. It could have been a Jeep. I just like the Commando a lot because I'm Filipino, and the Philippines still uses these in their armed forces. I gotta get through these. I know it's already 7. But I wanted to cover something really special someone made for me in the Defector. So instead of the Spaz 12 with the Dragon's Breath, which is this is that mission in Hue City, by Woods from VC. Mason starts the level with a Remington M1110. With a Remington 1110, one of these at least. the like this is a little bit anachronistic, but this version could have been fine because it was accurate to the 1960s because this fast 12 was not invented yet. Mace starts the level with a Remington 1110 with conventional rounds, a Colt Python, and a Colt Model 605. So something I wanted to show off is a lot of the this is something that thankfully that Black Ops 1 did get accurate. A lot of the troops in Vietnam would have been using the Colt Model 602, which is the second version of the M16, but a predecessor to the M16A1, which is my favorite version. I'm not a fan of the slab sides, but it's an interesting look, especially for its time with the it's got the duckbill flash hider, it's got the slab side receiver and all that. This variant, which is a carbine variant, and finally, instead of the Car 15, this would have been my choice for the for the commando. This would be my choice for the follow Left 4 Dead ass shotgun. Hey pal, hey Hallowed. Haven't seen you in a while. Haven't seen you pop up in chat for a while. It's good to see you again. But yeah, these it kind of looks like the service rifle from New Vegas. These would have been the choices that I would have gotten in instead of the commando, which is what we got. Where's that? The commando here. The commando here instead of these, which is technically it is technically accurate for the time period, not the chopped carry handle, but instead of these I would have chosen one of these because little short stock. You stream when I sleep. I'm done with college for the summer. Hey. Good to see you again, even if it is super late over in Ireland. It is good to see you again. It is good to see you again. And Viet Cong would have carried a lot of these which are already covered. The MABPA-15s, which I have looked at. Another option alongside the high power, we get the New Vegas 9mm pistol here, but that in the original here, it showed off the CZ75, which, as the name implies, was invented in 1975, and not the highly anachronistic CZ75 portrayed here. My replacement for that would have been the Browning High Power, which would have been the Florida Sheriff's Department SWAT vehicle for real. It kind of looks like that kind of thing. The Cadillac H Commando. But one of these as replacement for the CZ75, and the MABPA-15 for the as an additional pistol option. Even though it something I think implied to be left behind by the French or by continued French involvement in the war, why the Viet Cong would be carrying one of those. Smith & Wesson, and the snipers will carry Mosin Nagants and K98Ks. There is a specific kind of Czech rifle that I would like to show off. The Czech Mosin. Yeah, the Czech M54, which I think, in my opinion, is one of the better looking Mosin derivatives. The Czech M54 bolt action bolt, which I don't think they would have been used in Vietnam, but having the Viet Cong use snipers sniper rifles like these would have been a fun addition. Would have been an interesting, visually interesting addition. And an M79 will be available for the mounted M60 at the end. Numbers. This is the big one because numbers is where the anachronisms stew in Black Ops gets really bad, because this is in Kowloon. A lot of the stuff showcased in the level, from the CZ75s to the from the CZ. Let me pull up numbers, which despite my dislike for the my dislike for anachronisms, a lot this is probably the most interesting level in the game, because where you play as Hudson, who is one of my favorite characters in the series, and you get the Season 75 with dual wheel. These would be replaced with high powers, which show up in Black Ops 2, but they don't show up in this game. This gets replaced by the PM63 rack. The PM63. These get replaced by these. These are the This is a Polish-made gun. This is a Polish-made weapon. Which does appear in the original Black Ops, by the way. It just doesn't appear very often. Gewehr 44, where is that? The PM63. Yeah, this guy. This is one of the ugliest guns I've ever seen, but since it's part of the original Black Ops identity, since it's part of the original Black Ops identity, I did not want to give this one up because it's so cool. It's so weird. It's so janky, but it's so interesting. And you would have had those in numbers instead. A lot of these, the Kiparis, that gets replaced by that. The Spaz 12, the Kiparis gets replaced by the, where is that? The Sechkin APS, as shown here. The RPG, the China Lake, and a lot of this stuff, I ended up adding a lot more. The Spectre gets replaced by the Walther MPL. HK21. This didn't exist at the time, I think, this variant. Dragunov did, but the Spaz 12 did not. That gets replaced. So instead, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go all out. Weaver's starting weapon will be an HS-10. Hudson's will be dual high powers, replacing the anachronistic CZ-75s. Spetsnaz use Stechkins, Makarov, and Scorpions alongside AKs and Dragunov. Chinese hitmen will use suppressed Walther PPs, Lugers, which we already covered, the Mauser M712s, the Tokarevs, the PPSH-41, and Type 63s, well, the Chinese snipers, because it's set in China. Why do you think Dragovich wouldn't have some kind of Chinese, like, local agents or local guides in the area alongside the, Why do you think Dragovich wouldn't have the Chinese on speed dial? I know it's during the Sino-Soviet split, but there's surely some Chinese sympathizers or like Maoist sympathizers that would probably sympathize with Dragovich that would have had them on his team. So we get those. Instead of the G11 he carries in the original, this is where I have to thank Luma the Car 15. He promised he would endorse me. He didn't promise anything. I promised I would endorse him because he made something for me real quick. This is something he submitted in DMs. A lot of this, because it really bugged me that a lot of this stuff here didn't exist at the time, especially the G11. So, and something I really liked, this is what we're calling the Metcalf EM3. This is not a real gun. This is a Photoshop. This is a Photoshop done by Mr. Loom here, who is graciously following me. Oh, by the way, Loom, you are free to show off anything that you make for me. You're free to show off. That you are free to show off here at any time, like on your main channel, on your main Twitter. He made this for me. This is what Clark would have been carrying instead of the G11. This is the Metcalf EM3, which is a British assault rifle in 7.62 by 39. Not 7.92 by 33, which is the same as the Sturmgewehr 44. And it's based off of this because we can't find any images of the Metcalf EM3. But Clark is supposed to be a British character, so having him carrying a British rifle, and he's working with like Nazis, so having him in a Nazi round would have fit his character really well instead of the G11 that he logs around in the mission. I wanted to show it off because Lou made this for me as a prospective thing, and I would have been impressed. This is the numbers mission is where I would show off probably a lot of the stuff that you would get in multiplayer. Instead of the G11, he carries the Metcalf EM3, FN Universal Carbines with the where's the FAL? The FN FAL. This is the FN Universal Carbine. This would have been modified to take Sturmgewehr 44 magazines. This would have been the fore end, while this would be the magazine. Remember Hallowed? I think I asked you one time like what I think the Legion, what if the Legion had adopted assault rifle, this is what it would kind of look like. Kind of like this with the FAL or the FNC, with the this style of with this style with the 7.92 by 7.92 by 33 insert here. This is another addition that I would have added. Another addition I would have added. What else? The AEM1s. The EM1, which is the Thorpe EM1, which is different from the EM3 that I showed off. Where is that? That comes later. The Hill H15. Oh, I forgot to mention this earlier. This would have been a Swedish counterpart to the RPD. That I think is interesting because it's kind of like the M249. It can feed through either belts or AK mags. Something I declined to mention earlier. Oh, where is that? The Thorpe EM1? No, it's the Corsac EM1, which is this big old lout of a gun, which is an 8mm Mauser. An 8mm Mauser of all times. This would have been available in my ideal multiplayer. I guess it's accurate for the time. I think if they were to produce rifles rather than scavenge, they would try to copy the NCR service rifle. The thing is, that issue being, I kind of want them to have their own visual identity. I know Caesar was an NCR citizen, but to me, I think he would want something kind of simple, or something more. And I changed my opinion in those days, and I honestly think that if the Legion were to adopt a new assault rifle, it would probably be some kind of reproduced AK in 5.56, like the Chinese assault rifle or the AK-112. But that's Fallout. That's in my opinion, the Legion would have selected something kind of like the AKs or the Chinese assault rifle for the handmade rifles from Fallout 4 would have been their choice because of the simplicity, and it doesn't take a lot of training to use. In my opinion, Caesar would have chosen weapons that were very easy to train his people to use in order to maximize training time and make training time more efficient. But going back to Black Ops, you'll get the EM1, EM2, and the EM3. The EM2, as well as the Jansen EM2. This is referenced, if you've played Fallout London, you'll know what this is. This is the Enfield EM2. This was a British bullpup rifle that was originally the first choice by the British Army, by Royal Small Arms to replace the Lee Enfield, but they got the FAL instead because the results from this just weren't good enough. But this has shown up in a lot of games recently, especially those set in the UK and Britain, and I think this would have been an awesome choice to have in Black Ops. This would have replaced the Enfield. Yeah, this is what would have replaced this. This was anachronistic, while the EM2 would have made sense for the time. The EM2 would have made sense for the time, to me at least. NATO standard, yeah. This got killed by NATO because it didn't accept NATO cartridges, and they couldn't find a way to make it work in 308. You get one of those EM2s, BSA 28Ps. Oh yeah, those. The BSA 28P rifle. And this is Britain tries to make the M14 before the M14, and they didn't get anywhere. They didn't really get anywhere. This was the only rifle that they chose that wasn't a bullpup, and they decided to go for the FAL anyway because I don't know why. It didn't get very far. The British tried this, but it didn't get very far. it was reliable but not particularly accurate. An explosion in the breach showed a fault, and though the revised variant subsequently performed well, the project was abandoned. So, if they worked out the kinks, they would have gotten it into Black Ops as a alternative kind of weapon. What else have I got? EM3s and B8. Walther MPL and MP40 more high powers, P38s, Garot 06. We already covered that. That's the Garot 06. I think we already covered that. That's the Sturmgewehr 45. That's the Garot 06. Third, we'll have these ones. These ones will be like this is getting get you like a taste of toxic multiplayer. These two would have been the stars of the show. The Winchester SPIW, or the Spew, and the Springfield Armory version. This is probably one of the craziest rifles of the time. The Springfield Armory Spew prototypes, at least the Spew 1962, or the versions that could work with, like, you'd have this handguard when the grenade launcher wasn't attached, and you'd have those. This was the original OICW. They attempted to, like, this was a research study conducted in order to find out, should we continue with the M16, should we go back to the M14, or should we travel in this new futuristic direction? Eventually they decided, let's just stick with the M16, and this was like, a lot of the stuff they made was wild. It was in flechettes. It was in like these special flechette rounds that would pierce armor that didn't exist at the time. It looked like this. Like, this is the Winchester version. This is the Springfield version. These were wild things that they had back then, and I think Black Ops 2 attempted to do this with the sort of 3-round burst salvo rifle concept. These would have fired at, I think, full auto or 3-round burst. And why does Clark have any of these? It's never explained, but it's never explained why he has all the guns he does in the original game either. And Hill H15s, a T148 grenade launcher. This would have been fun. Let's go show that off. This is basically an M79, but it's Demo Man's gun from Team Fortress 2. It has 3 shots. You would open it, I think you would shove it through, and then you'd be loaded again, and you'd have 3 shots. That would be available in the level. You have the China Lake, which is already present in the game. Winchester LMR, the Hill H15. Where is that? The Hill H15. Which is, like, this was kind of the predecessor to the P90. It has the, you can have it as the pistol configuration or the rifle configuration, where it's like this big top cover, it would feed through. This is the barrel from the MP40 that they just stuck on this thing, and having that would be so cool to have in a game, where you'd have this funky looking, like, techno weapon of its time as a predecessor to kind of like the P90 and the Calico that you would get in later games. That's the Hill H15. Where's this Sidewinder? This is the Sidewinder, which would have been insane, which I've never seen any of these before, but it's of the era in the mid-1960s. So this would have been 1966 through 1968. So this took place, the mission takes place in 1968. So these would have been accurate. These would have been screen accurate for the time, so to speak. That would have offered like a really interesting modern weapon. The Remington M53, which I showed earlier, with XM148s. Where is that? XM148 grenade launcher. This is what should have been the M203 instead of the what we got, because these were in service during the time. This was a single shot basic break action one that you would slide it open, you would pump it, you would load it closed. This is what like Mason and company should have got. HGUP Model 66s, and this is probably the most insane one that I would show here, and it would get a starring role. We don't know how this thing works. There's like Apparently, this is a diagram of how the H cup 66 or 68 is supposed to work. This is the charging handle. This is the trigger. We know that's the sights. We know the magazine is supposed to go in there. We don't know anything about this. Apparently, it was supposed to be caseless. Apparently, it could have been a cased round. We literally do not know how this thing works. Hallowed. This could easily have been dropped into a Fallout setting and it would have worked immediately. The H-Cup Model 66, this would have been perfect for both Fallout and Black Ops as this sort of, this is a schizophrenic weapon, and I love it. This would have been present in the level. Hudson would have taken a liking to it, I think. Hudson would have picked one up. And that's not even the most insane one that we have for my proposals, which we have in You Only Live Twice. Here we go. This would have been the one of two hand cannons available, the NBA Gyrojet, because it's a gun that shoots rockets. And in real life, these were not explosive. These were just ballistic only, kinetic only. But having them be explosive would have been really interesting and I guess really funny to use in multiplayer. Where you'd have something like those and you'd load it, it's a slower load because you'd have to open up the slide and single load it, kind of like the Steyr 1912. We don't know how this thing works. This is the most 60s technological thing ever. Yeah, the majority of what I am showing off here, this American weapon right here, the H-Cup 66, and this British weapon, the Corsac EM1, and the Metcalf EM3, is something, and as well as the Thorpe EM1. We don't exactly know how these work, and I had to ask this guy, Loma the Car 15, to make this one for me because I couldn't find the original photograph for the Metcalf EM3. A lot of these, we don't know how they work. Most of what we know is from Ian from Forgotten Weapons, whose website I've been showing off quite a bit. That's all we know. We don't know how this thing works, but it's fun. And speaking of which, the George Wilson match. The George Wilson match 45. Oh yeah. A prototype 45 auto pistol. This would have been this would have been your alternative to the 1911. As your alternative to the 1911, you would have gotten one of these, and it would have been insane. We only have one of these in even when Ian fired one of these in Forgotten Weapons, he didn't fully understand how they worked. Because the slide goes back and there's this protrusion there. And the Remington M53. This would have been another alternative to the 1911, which is another thing that didn't show up in the original Black Ops, but I think it would have been interesting as well. It doesn't show up in any game. I think it should have showed up in Enlisted, but overall, it's another one that we don't really see much of, but it's quickly become one of my favorite obscure pistols because this technically beat the 1911, but since the Army already adopted the 1911 and was already producing them, this fell to the wayside and never got produced. They made a modern pistol based on it later on, but it was a failure. And to round it out, the Kimball third, yeah, not Kimball from New Vegas. I guess this might have been what he carried. This would have been the Desert Eagle of its time. This is in 30 carbine, and this was in 30 carbine, and this would have been their I guess sort of the stand-in for the Desert Eagle. The slide velocity was high enough that the guns very quickly battered the slide stop lock. These would peen into form at first, then crack, and then eventually either bend to the point the gun would not cycle or break off and allow the slide to come off right the back of the frame, because these were too powerful. Yeah, the rare, very rare Kimball Arms 45. This would have been your not Desert Eagle, and I think it would have been really funny to see these in multiplayer. And you like overall numbers would get you a chance to see what you would see in multiplayer. And then in Project Nova, something else, Russians will be seen making use of SVT-40s and DP-27s, which if you know Rainbow Six Siege, you know what this is. If you know Rainbow Six Siege, you've probably heard of this one. This is the big old dinner plate. This is the Tachanka dinner plate. I would have added this in, and especially because later versions have, I think the Viet Cong would have been using these as well as the belt fed variation. Yeah, the RP-46. These would have as the RP-46. These would have been the gun of choice for the Viet Cong. A lot of for the medium machine gun of choice because they didn't have access to the PK. And Gewehr 43s and high powers would have been present along the standard. I included the Gewehr 43 for a very specific reason. Hold on, let me go find it. Because there's this really funny shot of Frank Sinatra aiming a rifle out the window, implying that he killed JFK. I won't forgive Ubisoft for what they did to that gun. Yeah, it is a shame. But yeah, look, it's Frank Sinatra with a Nazi gun pretending to kill Kennedy. This is it's about Frank Sinatra. This movie is about Frank Sinatra playing a crazed madman who wants to kill the president. And he has a Gewehr 43, and there's this point where he mounts a scope and a suppressor and like an extended mag on it. And this was in 1954, so they predicted like everyone putting together really. He took a bring back rifle. He took a bring back rifle and did all these things to it, and that's why I included the Gewehr 43 because I think it would be fun in multiplayer. Okay, so we're almost done with like the missions that I wanted to show off. Frank Sinatra fucking killed JFK. It's real. It's real. In Victor Charlie, and we're getting. I want to speed through these a little bit, but for something I did want to show off is. Oh, where is that? Discord isn't working at the moment. Where is that? Hack of the. Something I wanted to show off is one of these. This isn't related to the guns, but these would have been really cool to see in the game because the PBR, but actually no, that comes later in Victor Charlie. Let's go to the Victor Charlie mission. Starts with a Walther P38, and then the XM191 Flash, because the M202, because they call it the Grim Reaper in the game. Victor Charlie. Oops, I might have deleted the wrong one. Victor Charlie. In Victor Charlie, the M202, this is anachronistic for the time, so I included its prototype instead, which would have been a little bit more appropriate of the time. Victor Charlie. PPS 43s. Most of these we already covered. Weapons cache courtesy of Bowman will include an AR-10 with a scope. This one, the Dutch AR-10. Does this look familiar? Hallowed? This is the Dutch AR-10. And in my opinion, it would have replaced the Walther WA-2000. Dutch-made Portuguese contract AR-10 with a scope. This would have replaced the WA-2000 in a lot of these. Does it look familiar, Hallowed? This is what Josh Sawyer said that the service rifle was also partially based on. This is the original AR-10, as well as the M16A1 with M17A1. did I? I think I made a typo there, but I'll look at it later on. I'll recheck it later on. With XM78 heat rounds take the place of its anachronistic M202 counterpart. And then for crash site, the crash site is the one that I wanted to show off. Not necessarily like some of the guns too, but this would have made a really interesting version of the PBR. There's that scene where they play Sympathy for the Devil, and where you're going down the river and you're shooting up all the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army that are like hitting back at you in Laos. This would have been perfect as as a setup. Woods and Bowman here with grenade launchers. This one with a cannon. Mason with a cannon, and the Marine guy that you have to protect up on this top turret. Up on this top turret. That's like this is. I need to do it like this. Deserves the mechanical marvels all on its own. These are just really interesting machines that I wish were prominently featured in more media, because they're very Hollywood worthy. They're very Hollywood worthy because they're just so interesting. They're so sci-fi for the era, but they existed in real life. So this is like the U.S. Navy had these attack hovercraft that they used in Vietnam, and using them in Laos would have been an interesting variation on the PBR sequence. Instead, starting loadout with a Colt Model 605 with Colt scope and a China Lake. Where is that? The China Lake. So, like, this is already in the original game, the China Lake, but what I think they should have added was 40mm canister shot, which is essentially flechettes like these, but turning one of the, like, it already looks enough like a shotgun. Adding in canister shot would turn it into an actual shotgun, which would have been fun as an alternative to the explosive rounds that you get in game. U.S. Army pilots, we get those. Running high powers, Mac 10s. Mac 10s are already in the game as the Mac 11. The Mac 11 didn't exist, but the Mac 10 kind of did as prototypes at that point. And the Stoner 63, which is already in the game. Let me pull that up. Black Ops 6. Oop. Let me go find that. Rifles. Is it in here? No, it was in Black Ops Cold War. It was in Black Ops Cold War that you get the Stoner 63A. This is already in the game. It's just a different configuration. This variant is what I would have wanted in the I gotta head out. Glad I got a bit of the stream. Thanks for coming in. I really appreciate that. It's good to see you again, Hallowed. But yeah, these would have been my choice for machine gun in the for machine gun in the in a lot of the Vietnam sections alongside the M60. And another thing for, like, I guess aircraft that I wanted to mention is MTS 2112. The Antonov AN-12. So they would ride these all the way up the river until they reach the crash site, and then that crash site would be at where's that? Would be one of these. Would be one of these AN-12s. Actually, would and yeah, crashed Soviet aircraft is an Antonov AN-12 instead of the C-130 we shown in the game. This is the Russian Air Force version, but the older variation is the one used by China. This is what would have been crashed at that crash site instead of the C-130, because it was it just doesn't make sense for the Soviets to be using American aircraft. Soviet cargo instead of China Lakes, and then handgun at the end will be this Colt Python. Will be the Colt Python from the game, from the original. WMD something I noticed is why doesn't the CIA team in WMD wear balaclavas to shield them from the cold? It never made sense to me. It never made and like what a lot of other characters in COD should be wearing like something like face coverings to keep them out from the cold, as well as quivers for the crossbow bolts. Soviet soldiers will be wearing period accurate SHA 68, covering those. Because the AUG is in the original. The Steyr AUG here is set in this in WMD in Yamantau, the Yamantau levels. All of these are this is anachronistic. This did not exist during that time, so I replaced it with his previously gotten HGUP 66 that he got with a cold scope on top with like a starlight scope, which did exist, by the way, the starlight scopes on top. Who like no one knows how these work, but you know. Oh, starlight scope V. Where is it? Yeah, the start like one of these big old things. This is 6 pounds. This scope weighs 6 pounds. This weighs as much as the entire gun. And it's so cool. This was one of the earliest night vision devices that I would have given, it's not like that I would have given, thank you, Lum with a car 15 for making this. This guy made that. This is one of the earliest night vision devices of the Vietnam War, and they would have been used. I think they would have been perfect for Black Ops 1. And overall, yeah, I have a lot of problems with WMD, like how it's written. But overall, overall, it's like another really interesting mission that I saw, because it has that sort of Mission Impossible vibe, where you're going, or like GoldenEye vibe, where you're going through the base. Makarovs and Sketchkins, the TKB 048, which we brought up earlier. The TKB 408. TKB 408s, MTS 2112s, Makarovs and Setchkins, DSHKs and PKs will be used as MG emplacements. Weaver and the 2 other CIA glowers use OSS Little Joe crossbows as, like, this is going to be your second crossbow in the game, and it's the Little Joe. Where's that? The Big Joe 5 and the Little Joe. This is the Little Joe, which is used by the Fear in Metal Gear Solid 3. This would have been a really cool addition to, like, the sort of Assassin's Arsenal that you get, the sort of espionage-inspired arsenal, because this was made by the OSS for World War II. These little crossbows that were used when we couldn't get access to a gun. These were used as and it's a really interesting bow design as well. But yeah, it's the I think it's an opposite ending recurve, like. What kind of, like, how would you describe this? It's more like a catapult than a bow, because the string goes out instead of in. The string goes out instead of in. It's catapulted outwards. And that's my addition for WMD. And in Payback, Army will have a variety of weapons. And the Browning superposed gets involved here, because technically the Olympia from the original, or the Beretta 682, the Rotwell Olympia, these were anachronistic. Unfortunately, these did not exist at that time. But what did is the Browning superposed, which you get here. Which is I guess which was one of the first over and under shotguns that you could buy. These were really pretty for their time. And I guess these would replace the Olympia in accurate media, in an accurate retelling of Black Ops 6. The Hind is kept because it's the Hind. What can I say? You know, it's the Hind. It's kind of like Metal Gear Solid 3. It wouldn't be Black Ops, even if it isn't historically accurate. It wouldn't be Black Ops without the Hind. and Smith & Wesson models routines. Afasev A12.7. That like this is describing all the armaments of this fictional hind where you would get to shoot and like Woods would get to shoot and you would get to shoot together to cooperate. And LP and instead and there's that ending scene in of Payback where you get to use a flamethrower, and instead of using the underbarrel flamethrower, in my opinion, you get the what is it? The LPO-50, which I mentioned earlier. These were present in Far Cry. And I think this would have made an interesting kill streak in something like Black Ops. As a full body, like you get this as a kill streak, and it has that three tank design that's so cool. You get that. I am rushing a little bit so like I can make sure I can get all this in. Rebirth, I think I might be able to spurg out about some of my chosen kill streaks that I chose instead, but I would probably end at 8 o'clock because because I've been talking for a while. For Rebirth is another one of those levels that I really enjoy because there's something so appreciable about that apocalyptic atmosphere that is a real thing. Aralsk 7 on Rebirth Island in real life in Uzbekistan. Yeah, this is a real place. This is a real place. Of course, the lake is gone now because it was so polluted and drained by and this was used as a bioweapons and chemical weapons testing site in real life by the Soviet Union, which is scary to think about that they had a site like that. Vozrozhedenia Island. Smugalanek could probably like pronounce this. Vozrozhedenia Island, which is supposed to be Rebirth in Uzbek Russian, is the Uzbekistan-Kazakhstan border in Soviet Union. Mason's primary will be the Scroll Python and the SOG knife. Something I declined to highlight is I wanted Mason's sidearm alongside his Colt Python to be something like this one from The Man from U.N.C.L.E., kind of leading less into the 80s action movie stuff and more to the 60s conspiracy thriller kind of affair. You'd have a suppressed Walther P38 like this, leading into the sort of spy fiction. You'd have one of these that he'd get in Germany, and he'd use it through most of this. He would have one of those that he would get in Spain and use for the rest of the story until the end at least. Hudson's T, and as well as something with real chemical weapons. Also, hello Irishman. Yeah. Speaking of the Irishman, we had a conversation a while ago about about gas masks and stuff like that because he owns a gas mask, and it always bugged me in the Rebirth Island section in Rebirth. In Rebirth. In here in Alpha Squad, because the guys coming in with the hazmat suits, the guys coming in with the hazmat suits, they don't wear period correct gas masks. Instead, they would be using M17 gas masks. They would be using these, which were invented at that time. They would be using these. They would be using with the chemical hood. It would be really It would be something like this for authentic US kit and GP5 gas mask. This is what the Soviets would be wearing. This is like the classical scary stalker gas mask. This is what the Soviets would be wearing. It would be really cool. You'd have those, and I didn't get into body armor, but something that bugged me is like a lot of the body armor that they're wearing either they don't wear any body armor at all, which it's period accurate, but I wanted to spice things up. And something that's said during the Rebirth Island sequence is Hudson says oh, don't let your hazmat suit get breached, or else the Nova 6 will get you. Well, they would be wearing body armor over their hazmat suits, and as a result, I decided to give them the silicon carbide chicken plate. Chicken plate armor. Chicken plate armor in the Vietnam War. This was the first ever plate carrier design for the US military, and these would have been I think like these were not designed for infantry use. These were designed for air crew as like flak jackets, but these were in fact bulletproof, and I think these would have been a really good addition to the hazmat suit sequences, and as well as they would be wearing helmets as well over their hazmat suits to make sure that no part of them gets breached or grazed by the bullets. Novus Revelations, Rebirth, and the stolen BTRs would be BTR 60Ps, BTR 60. These were the ones used back then. These would have been stolen from the Soviet Union, which is like I guess the only reasonable explanation for how a CIA team got their hands on them. But for that Rebirth Island sequence, Hudson's primary will be the H-Cup Model 66 using WMD, now equipped with a Starlight Scope, as we mentioned before. His secondary will be an EM2. Will be this one, the EM2, also with a Starlight Scope, because that area calls for a that area it takes place at night, so and they would need it because of the smoke bombardment, so they would be able to see their enemies anyway. Weaver and several others have the same setup, while their additional team will be carrying Winchester and Springfield SPIWs. These would be fun, because you get a pocket LMG out of an assault rifle, and you'd get these. This is what the additional CIA team would be carrying, because like they would be carrying prototype weapons that would be. I wanted to lean into the prototype stuff for Rebirth, because Rebirth is one of my favorite levels to watch, at least, and I really want to play it because the visuals are so striking and so nightmarish, and the aesthetic is on point. With their grenade launcher components equipped with canister shot, Hudson and Weaver pick up the car instead of merely rolling it into the window. And yeah, and you don't get any guns in Revelations, but in Redemption, this is the ending level. Is you get the Springfield's SPIW you get these with the Oxford red dots. I don't think I'll have the time to cover all the to cover the attachments and stuff that I would put on, because a lot of them are really interesting. I didn't know that a lot of these existed at the time, but I guess it's a personal project that I'll have to save for later. You'd have one of these with a Oxford red. With an Oxford red dot sight. You get with one of these. These were one of the first red dot sights, and unlike a lot of the stuff from Black Ops, these would have been accurate for the time period, because these were occluded eye gun sights. You'd have to look through. You'd have to pick up your gun, look. You'd have one eye. You'd have one eye through the lens of this, and then your other eye, instead of being closed, would be open, because this is a closed-ended I think I remember this is a closed-ended one. Oh no, it's wrong. This is the Oxford electronic gun sight, so this is the original that you could see through instead of the occluded gun sight. You'd have one of those and a MAC-10, replacing the anachronistic FAMAS and the MAC-11 from the previous sections, and Hudson and Weaver will be engaging as well. And one of my favorite things to mention is that for the underwater sequences, I would have them run MBA gyrojets, which is a variant that they would call the Lance Jet. The MBA Lance Jet, which would have been functioning as an underwater pistol. This is like an underwater gun that you would have used for the underwater sequences. And especially something I really adored is in the ending scene of Redemption, where you're assaulting the Soviet Navy submarine base, you could have easily incorporated a lot of Thunderball kind of aesthetics there from James Bond, because it takes place in the same era and it would have the same design language. Why not lean in a little bit more? That's probably the most 60s style level, and again, I love the aesthetics from Rebirth. But yeah, I think that's all I have for now. I have like 4 more minutes. I'll go through the. This is probably one of my longest streams actually, because I started at 4:50 and I'm gonna end up at 7:50. There's three plus hours. I ended up adding like body armor mechanics as well. I ended up all of these. I don't think I'll be able to cover because I have like. You know what? I'll probably go until 8:10. Until 8:10 would be nice. The T131 reflex sight. This is from Automag Archive, who I follow a lot and comment a lot on Twitter. This is probably like one of the first Halo or reflex sights. This is on an M1 Garand. This is probably one of the first reflex sights. This would have been perfect for a setting like Black Ops. The Nidar Model 47 for the US shotguns. This is what was in Call of Duty Vanguard. This did not exist at the time, but this did not exist during World War II, but it was one of the first reflex sights to come out there, and these didn't need a battery because they operated on sunlight. They would be reflected through this, like, they would form a light pattern here. They would form a light pattern like that, just like that, on the Nidar 47 for shotguns. Nidar 47 reflector sight, the single point SP2. You know what? I'll cover the guns that I didn't get to cover here. TKB 512. The TKB 57. No, the 517. This is the one. This is another one by another like prototype Soviet assault rifle that would have really fit in well with the aesthetics of the game. This was competitor the AK. It used the same magazines but used a different operating system, and it would have been these were really cool because it used delayed blowback. You don't see that a lot in rifles, and these like this plus the folding stock variation, these were really pretty rifles as well for their time, I would say, because of that curvature of the wood and everything. That would have been nice. Another one that I wanted to show off, I showed off this one. I showed off the Sidewinder. I showed off the CMG2. This one would have been available in multiplayer as the counterpart to the Striker or the Street Sweeper in later games. This is the Winchester Liberator. It's a break action. You would load 4, fire 4, and you would. It was one of the funkier weapons of its time. It's so interesting because this is like one of the weirdest break action shotguns that are out there. This would have been perfect because apparently these were designed. These were not used, but they were designed for the Bay of Pigs invasion and Brigade 2506 for some kind of emergency, like holdout weapon that could be used to equip insurgents and guerrillas. That would have been interesting in multiplayer. We already covered these because these are what the M16s in Vietnam would have been. Ooh, this one. This is the TRW low maintenance. This is technically anachronistic. The TRW low maintenance rifle, because this was developed in the 1970s instead of the 1960s, but it was so interesting that I like the Hind. I really couldn't help myself, and I ended up incorporating it because it needs, like, the aesthetic of a side folding rifle is too cool to pass up. It was designed for Vietnam anyway. And it's not hard to believe that a few ideas for these were floating around in the late 1960s. As the TRW low maintenance rifle, you would also get the Johnson M1941 LMG. These were in use by both the Cuban Revolution, by Castro's forces, and by the Cuban rebels, Brigade 2506. This was a This was their 30-06 LMG as like a replacement for the BAR, and having another side-loading LMG would have been really fun. That's another choice I made, the TKB 517. And this is a French where is that? PDW. We already covered the M1 carbines pretty early on. The Thrush Special, which I wanted to highlight from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. as well. This like really old TV show that had a lot of cool guns in it as well. This is based on the M3 carbine. This could have been used by a few characters in like Vietnam sections or in Cuba sections, because these were in use during Korea. These were one of the earliest night vision equipped weapons in use by the U.S. military. The Thrush carbine and the genuine M3 carbine, which like these ones would have been interesting. And the M2 carbine, the SOE produced M1, the LF57. The LF57, which is actually the LF58. My mistake. It's the LF58. Frankie LF58, which was a prototype rifle made in Italy as the it was in 30 carbine, but it kind of feels like a derivative of the Sturmgewehr 44 as well, which is why I decided to throw it in. Model 58 and the Frankie LF58. This would have been a really nice addition as a sort of lightweight weapon. The FN Cal, and then this as the other like counterpart to the 5.56 rifles. Hallowed was in here previously. The derivative of this being the FNC was famous in heat, and it was also famous for famous for a lot of reasons, but I suggested to him once that this could be the rifle for Caesar's Legion from Fallout New Vegas. I don't see it now as much, but like this was available during the time in Vietnam, so this would make sense for Black Ops, something like this. And it was a commercial failure, unfortunately. We didn't see much of it. We later got the we later got the FNC to come out of that, so that's there. And something else that I forgot to show off was the SG. This is from Switzerland. The SIG SG 531, which is another 5.56 early 5.56 assault rifle that would have been in use at this time as an alternative to the M16s and all that, and the H&R T223. Let me find that one. H&R T223. These were used by the Navy SEALs during Vietnam. The SEALs and the T223. Because it's made by it's imported by Harrington and Richardson. And rounding that out, the Sturmgewehr 510 or the SG 510. This would have been the another battle rifle option in 308. In 308. This is another, like, for if there are any levels set in Switzerland, this would have been my choice, because, and it's one of my favorites because of Secret Service. Yeah, there we go. This is another one. This is really Black Ops coded. Another Bond movie that really fits the bill is the Sterling Mark IV. We already covered these because these would have been used earlier in Spain. And the SIG SG 510. These were being used by Spectre guards in this movie, and it would have been really interesting to see them used by Soviets posing as Swiss agents, or I guess general bad guys in Black Ops 1. What else do I have? I have the RK-62, the Norco Type 63, we have that. We have the Winchester LMR, and the VZ58. This would have been another alternative to the AK. As a check weapon. It's I think that's Bakelite furniture. As a check weapon, I think I kind of covered this low key in Black Ops 6. In Black Ops 6, and finally rounding out the rifles, the AR-18. This was only a prototype at the time. At the time frame Black Ops 1 takes place, but having something like this would have been having something like this. The prototypes did exist at the time, so I think it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to have this involved in something like Black Ops 1. There are some anachronisms, but that stretch things a little bit. But for the most part, I think I'm satisfied with what I have here. The Krieghoff FG42. I think we covered everything. Oh yeah, we have the Hakim. We almost forgot the Hakim rifle. The Hakim. This would have been used in the Egypt levels. This is also direct impingement, and this would also be used in the Swedish levels because this is based off a Swedish rifle, a Swedish or a But yeah, overall, I think that's an abrupt ending. I don't know exactly how to end because I've been droning on for so long, but I am happy with this list because, oh man, I forgot the inclusion of the Ruger Model 44, This would have been a semi-auto in 44 Magnum that you would have been able to that would have been an option in multiplayer as well. Because I like variety. This was introduced in 1960, so it would have been fit and fair for the time. And Marlin 1895. This would have been a counterpart to the Winchester 1894 for as a sniper rifle and for the Spanish levels. I think this version was around at that time, but I'm not sure. I think that version was around at the time, but I'm not quite sure. DP27, the FN Mag, the Taden gun. Ooh, we forgot the Taden. This one would be in 280 British, similar to the EM2. That's the only other 280 gun that I could really find that would fit besides the BSA rifle. This would have been a real vibe to use in something like multiplayer. And the AA52 MG. This is the French This is a French GPMG that could have seen usage in the Vietnam sections because of it was present in the Vietnam War for the most part. And I think that rounds it out. I think we have the FRF1, you have the MAS 36. Oh yeah, the FRF1. This is a really long list. This is probably the only modern sniper rifle you can kind of get, but it was based off the MAS 36 anyway, so it's kind of its time anyway. Oh, we have we forgot some of these. The Browning Auto 5, which is a classic. This was present in a lot of Call of Duty World War II games already anyway, so it being included in Black Ops as a semi-auto shotgun option would have been perfect sense. And the Athaka 37 is already in game, just we already covered kind of it. Oh, hold on, I think I have to go. I have to go, guys. I'm really sorry. I think I might have to. I'm gonna have to end off real soon. I'm gonna raid real quick into someone else. I'm gonna raid it. I'm gonna raid real quick into someone else because I don't think I can keep going. Hold on. Let me mute for. Sorry for the abrupt ending, because I kind of have to sign off at the moment. I know this was more of a rambling stream because this was a little bit unfocused and just me talking about stuff that I found, but it's really cool and I'm glad I could share it with you. Thank you, Big Yike. Thank you, Cielo Jose. Thank you, and thank you, Hallowed, for coming back in. Lots of love, guys, and I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys next time. I've got a big thing planned for next week, so I hope you'll join me then. Anyway, so anyways, let's see who's going on. If Crisis is still going on, then I'll be raiding into her, 'cause she's nice to me. She's really cool. She's really cool, and her and her boyfriend's really cool to me too. guy's a Chevy guy. But yeah, I've got something else going on. Hold on, is there anything else? Magic Girl Crisis, is she still live? No, she's not. We'll raid instead into, oh, there's Filian. There's 2 Filian channels. There's Kurosai. There's Nyaru. There's Gundam. There's Doggy. There's Nimi. SG Mini Nikki, Hanti Miles. You know what? I think I'll raid into this new guy called Hanti Miles. Yeah. Manual raid. Otsu love everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And I'll see you next time.